Grace Kelly wasn't just beautiful. She was untouchable. Hollywood's most powerful men wanted her, but none of them could figure out how to keep her. She had the face of an angel, the elegance of a queen, and a mystery that drove men insane. Directors fell at her feet. Co-stars lost themselves in her. Even a prince gave up everything just to call her his. But was Grace Kelly truly the perfect woman, or was there something much darker behind the fantasy? Beauty and elegance. Let's get one thing straight. Grace Kelly was beautiful. She was the kind of beautiful that stopped men in their tracks. It wasn't flashy or over the top like some of the other Hollywood bombshells of her era. There were no exaggerated curves, no bold come-hither stares. Instead, she had this cool, effortless kind of beauty that felt almost untouchable, like something out of a dream. Her features were as close to perfect as they come. High cheekbones, delicate nose, full lips, and those piercing blue eyes that always seemed to have a hint of mystery behind them. And then, of course, there was her hair, that icy blonde, always perfectly styled, never a strand out of place. Whether she wore it in soft waves, swept back into an elegant chignon, or tucked neatly under a chic hat, it framed her face like she had stepped right out of a classic painting. But what really set her apart was the way she carried herself. On one hand, Grace looked like royalty, and on the other, she moved like it too. Long before she ever became a princess, everything about her was poised, polished, and refined. She had the kind of grace, pun intended, that made even simple movements, walking into a room, taking off her gloves, sipping a cocktail, seem mesmerizing. She wasn't trying too hard, she wasn't putting on a show, it was just who she was. And then there was her style. No one did elegance quite like Grace. In an era where some actresses leaned into sex appeal with tight dresses and plunging necklines, she stood out by doing the opposite. She was always perfectly put together, effortlessly chic. Crisp white shirts, tailored trousers, structured handbags, and those iconic pearl earrings. It was understated, but completely unforgettable. She made modesty look irresistibly alluring. And when she did wear something dramatic, like those stunning gowns in To Catch a Thief, she looked like she had just stepped out of a fairy tale. She made men curious. Grace Kelly had this incredible knack for keeping people intrigued. She wasn't just a Hollywood star, she was an enigma, and that's what made men, and honestly, everyone, so fascinated by her. Grace was all about keeping her personal life under wraps. She once said, "But is it too much to ask to want to protect your private life, your inner feelings?" By not laying everything out for the world to see, she kept people guessing, and that intrigue made her even more captivating. She believed that a bit of mystery was essential. Grace famously remarked, "Emancipation of women has made them lose their mystery." She understood that not revealing everything added to her charm, making men even more curious about her. In her films, Grace often played characters who were the perfect blend of elegance and intrigue. In Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window, she portrayed Lisa Fremont, a high-society fashionista with a daring side. One minute, she's the picture of sophistication. The next, she's sneaking into a neighbor's apartment to solve a mystery. This mix kept audiences and her co-stars captivated. Her personal life was just as intriguing. Grace had relationships with several leading men, including William Holden and Gary Cooper, yet she never flaunted these romances, keeping details scarce and letting the public wonder about the real story behind the headlines. Even after becoming Princess of Monaco, Grace maintained her enigmatic aura. She gracefully balanced her royal duties with a sense of privacy, rarely giving interviews and keeping her personal life out of the spotlight. This discretion only added to her allure, making her a timeless icon of mystery and elegance. In a world where everyone shares everything, Grace Kelly's ability to keep a part of herself hidden made her stand out. It's that sense of mystery that continues to captivate people, proving that sometimes less truly is more. She was highly intelligent. She was sharp and thoughtful, and that made her even more appealing. In her movies, she often played smart characters. In Rear Window, she was Lisa Fremont, a fashion consultant who didn't just look good, but also had brains. She helped solve a mystery, showing she was more than just arm candy. Off-screen, Grace was known for her quick wit and intelligence. Director Alfred Hitchcock, who worked with her on several films, admired her sharp mind and professionalism. He once said she was a snow-covered volcano, hinting at the passion and intelligence beneath her calm exterior. When she became Princess of Monaco, Grace didn't just sit back and enjoy the title. She got involved in various causes, especially those helping children and the arts. She founded Redmond ONeal in 1963 to support children's rights and development. She also started the Princess Grace Foundation in 1964 to help local artists. These efforts showed her commitment to making a difference and her ability to use her position wisely. Grace's intelligence was also evident in how she managed her public image. She was careful about the roles she chose and the way she presented herself, maintaining an air of elegance and mystery that kept people intrigued. Her thoughtful approach to her career and personal life made her stand out in Hollywood and beyond. In short, Grace Kelly's intelligence was a big part of her charm. She wasn't just a beautiful actress. She was a smart, dedicated woman who used her talents and position to make a positive impact. Her provocative roles. Grace Kelly's allure was significantly amplified by her portrayal of provocative roles that captivated male audiences. In Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window, 1954, she played Lisa Fremont, a high society fashion consultant who exuded sophistication and allure. Her character's elegance and charm were irresistible, making her a focal point of male admiration. In To Catch a Thief, 1955, Kelly portrayed Frances Stevens, a wealthy American vacationing on the French Riviera. Her character was both seductive and assertive, engaging in playful yet suggestive banter with Cary Grant's character. This role showcased her ability to embody a sensuality that was both refined and enticing, further enthralling male viewers. These performances highlighted Kelly's talent for bringing complex, alluring women to life on screen. Her character's blend of elegance, intelligence, and subtle sensuality resonated deeply with male audiences, solidifying her status as a timeless icon of allure. She was hard to get. She was selective, deliberate, and had high standards, which only made her more irresistible. Men love a challenge, and Grace was the challenge. She wasn't cold or dismissive, but she didn't make herself too available either. She had a quiet confidence that said, "If you want me, you better be worth it." She wasn't the type to be swept off her feet by sweet talk or empty gestures. She valued intelligence, class, and charm. If a man wanted her attention, he had to earn it. This wasn't an act. Grace had grown up in a strict, well-to-do Philadelphia family where discipline and restraint were expected. She was raised to believe that love wasn't just about attraction. It was about compatibility, respect, and stability. Even when she was surrounded by the most eligible men in Hollywood, she never lost herself in the whirlwind of fame and romance. She had flings, sure. She dated, and even had rumored affairs with, some of the most powerful men of her time, from Clark Gable to Bing Crosby to designer Oleg Cassini. But she wasn't reckless. She never let herself get caught up in scandalous drama or messy public breakups. And when it came to marriage, she was even more particular. She didn't rush into things, even when the world expected her to. She wanted something real. That's what made her eventual romance with Prince Rainier III of Monaco so compelling. It wasn't just a fairy tale. It was a decision she made with careful thought. He pursued her, and she didn't say yes until she was sure. Grace Kelly's love life wasn't about reckless passion or fleeting romances. It was about intention. She wasn't easily won over, and that made the chase all the more exciting. For men, the idea of being the one who could capture Grace Kelly's heart, that was the ultimate prize. She was playful and fun. Grace Kelly's poised and elegant exterior often led people to perceive her as reserved, but those who knew her well were delighted by her playful sense of humor and quick wit. One notable example of her lightheartedness is the long-running practical joke she shared with actor Alec Guinness. In his autobiography, Blessings in Disguise, Guinness recounted how he once played a prank on Grace, which evolved into an unspoken game between them that lasted 26 years. This enduring jest highlighted her appreciation for humor and her willingness to engage in playful interactions. Her co-stars also recognized and appreciated this facet of her personality. Bing Crosby, who starred alongside Grace in High Society, described her as the ideal girl with a delicious sense of humor. This acknowledgement from a seasoned actor like Crosby underscores the charm and wit she brought to her relationships and collaborations. Grace's humor wasn't confined to personal interactions. It also shone through in her professional life. She had a knack for delivering witty remarks and engaging in playful banter, which added depth to her on-screen performances and endeared her to colleagues and audiences alike. This blend of elegance and humor made her not only a captivating actress, but also a beloved friend and co-star. In essence, Grace Kelly's ability to balance her refined public image with a genuine, playful sense of humor made her all the more enchanting. It revealed a down-to-earth and relatable side, allowing those around her to connect with her on a more personal level and further solidifying her status as an enduring icon. She was a literal fairy tale princess. Grace Kelly was already the kind of woman men fantasized about. Stunningly beautiful, impossibly elegant, and wrapped in an air of mystery that made her seem just out of reach. But then, in one of the most legendary twists of fate, she did something no Hollywood actress had done before. She became a real-life princess. And with that, she went from being a screen goddess to an untouchable fairy tale. When she married Prince Rainier III of Monaco in 1956, it wasn't just a wedding. It was an event. It was the closest thing the world had ever seen to a real Cinderella story. One moment, she was America's most glamorous movie star, and the next, she was royalty, wearing a gown that looked like it had been spun from pure magic, stepping into a life that seemed almost too perfect to be real. And for men everywhere, that was both intoxicating and devastating. Because Grace Kelly wasn't just the ultimate fantasy anymore, she was the fantasy that no one could ever have. The idea of winning the heart of the most elegant, most desirable woman in Hollywood, that's every man's dream. And Prince Rainier actually did it. He didn't just date her, didn't just flirt with her on a film set. He married her, whisked her away to a palace, and made her his queen. Well, technically, his princess, but still, it was the ultimate romantic triumph, proof that fairy tales could happen in real life. And then, just like that, she was gone. She walked away from Hollywood, from fame, from everything that made her an icon, and stepped into a world that only made her seem even more mythical. She didn't fade into obscurity. She disappeared into a literal palace. No scandal, no messy downfall, just a quiet, graceful exit that left men everywhere wondering what if. She had already seemed unattainable, but now she was truly out of reach, and that only made her legend grow. Grace Kelly was already the kind of woman men dreamed about, but by becoming a princess, she became something even more powerful, an idea, a perfect vision of grace, beauty, and class that no one could ever quite touch, and that's why, even decades later, she remains one of the most fascinating, most desired women of all time. She had incredible work ethic. After graduating from high school, she faced her father's skepticism about an acting career, as he viewed the profession as a slim cut above streetwalker. Undeterred, Grace moved to New York City to pursue her passion. She auditioned for the American Academy of Dramatic Arts using a scene from her uncle George Kelly's play, The Torchbearers. Although the school had already met its semester quota, she secured an interview and was admitted thanks in part to her uncle's influence. To support herself during her studies, Grace took up modeling, signing with the John Robert Powers Agency. She appeared in various commercials, including those for bug spray and cigarettes. Despite her family's affluence, she chose to live at the Barbizon Hotel for Women in Manhattan, adhering to her father's insistence. Her commitment to her craft was evident. She diligently practiced her speech using a tape recorder and worked tirelessly to refine her acting skills. Grace's perseverance extended beyond the classroom. She made her Broadway debut in Strindberg's The Father, performing alongside Raymond Massey. At just 19, her graduation performance was as Tracy Lord in The Philadelphia Story. Her early acting pursuits also led her to live television programs, where she appeared in nearly 60 live broadcasts. These experiences not only honed her acting abilities, but also showcased her versatility and dedication to her craft. Grace's hard work and persistence paid off when she caught the attention of Hollywood producers. Her film debut came in 1951 with a minor role in 14 Hours. Although the role was small, it marked the beginning of a remarkable, albeit brief, film career that would leave an indelible mark on Hollywood. She was kind and warm. Grace Kelly may have been known as Hollywood's ultimate ice queen, but underneath that cool, polished exterior was a woman with a warm heart, a deep sense of compassion, and an unwavering kindness that made people fall in love with her beyond just her beauty. Yes, she had that regal, untouchable quality. She was poised, composed, and never one for loud displays of emotion. But those who actually knew her, they painted a very different picture. Behind closed doors, Grace was funny, kind, and incredibly down-to-earth. She was the type of person who made others feel comfortable, who listened intently when people spoke, and who carried herself with a quiet humility that made her even more magnetic. That warmth only became more evident after she became Princess of Monaco. She could have easily embraced the role of distant royalty, living in luxury and staying detached from the world, but that was never who she was. Instead, she threw herself into charity work, dedicating her time to causes that helped children, the arts, and humanitarian efforts. She worked with the Red Cross, supported orphanages, and even founded the Princess Grace Foundation to help young artists. She used her status not to elevate herself, but to help others. And what's even more remarkable, despite being one of the most famous and admired women in the world, she never let it go to her head. People who met her, whether it was a fellow actor, a journalist, or an ordinary citizen, always said the same thing. She was gracious, polite, and completely free of arrogance. There was no diva behavior, no sense of superiority. She was simply Grace. She was artistic. Grace Kelly wasn't just a Hollywood star and a princess. She was also a genuine lover of the arts, which added even more depth to her already captivating persona. Beyond her acting career, she had a real passion for poetry and ballet, interests that she actively pursued throughout her life. In the late 1970s, Grace took to the stage for poetry readings across Europe and the United States. These events allowed her to share her love for literature with audiences, showcasing a personal and intellectual side that many fans hadn't seen before. It was a way for her to connect with people beyond the silver screen, highlighting her appreciation for the written word. Her enthusiasm for ballet was equally profound. In 1977, she lent her voice to narrate the documentary The Children of Theater Street, which delves into the lives of students at the renowned Vaganova School of Ballet in Russia. This project not only underscored her admiration for the discipline and beauty of ballet, but also her desire to bring its elegance to a broader audience. Grace's artistic pursuits didn't stop there. She also explored visual arts, creating pressed flower collages that reflected her keen eye for beauty and detail. This creative outlet allowed her to express herself in yet another medium, further demonstrating her multifaceted appreciation for the arts. These endeavors painted a picture of a woman deeply engaged with the arts, not just as a patron or observer, but as an active participant. Grace's artistic sensibility was a significant part of who she was, complementing her public image and contributing to her enduring legacy as an icon of elegance and grace. She could adapt really well. Imagine being at the pinnacle of your acting career, adored by fans worldwide, and then choosing to step away from the limelight to embrace a completely different life. That's exactly what Grace did when she married Prince Rainier III in 1956. Leaving behind the glamour of Hollywood, she moved to the tiny Principality of Monaco, nestled on the French Riviera. This wasn't just a change of address. It was a whole new world with its own set of traditions, languages, and expectations. Grace didn't just dip her toes into this new life. She dove in head first. She took on her royal duties with grace and dedication. From attending official events to engaging in philanthropic endeavors, Grace became an integral part of Monaco's identity. She became the president of the Red Cross of Monaco and founded Redmond ONeal, a non-profit organization recognized by the UN, focusing on the well-being of children worldwide. But here's the thing. While she embraced her role as princess, she never lost herself in the process. Grace managed to maintain her personal identity, blending her Hollywood sophistication with her royal responsibilities. She even brought a touch of American flair to Monaco, hosting annual Thanksgiving celebrations and organizing an American week where guests would play baseball and enjoy ice cream. Her incredible talent. Grace Kelly's talent was undeniable, and it's a big reason why men were so captivated by her. She was also flexible and dynamic with her roles. Let's go through some of them, shall we? In Rear Window, 1954, she played Lisa Fremont, a fashion consultant who wasn't just about looks. Remember that scene where she sneaks into the suspected murderer's apartment? It was intense, showing her character's bravery and adding depth to the suspense. Then there's Dial M for Murder, 1954, where Grace took on the role of Margot Wendis. There's this gripping moment when she's attacked in her own home, and her struggle is so real and raw. You can feel her fear and determination, making that scene unforgettable. But that's not all. In To Catch a Thief, 1955, she played Frances Stevens, a wealthy American in the French Riviera. There's a scene where she confronts Cary Grant's character, teasing him about his past as a thief. Her playful yet assertive demeanor in that moment showcased her versatility and charm. These performances weren't just about delivering lines. They were about embodying complex emotions and situations. Grace brought a depth to her roles that was both captivating and relatable, making her a standout talent in Hollywood. Her stunning eyes. Grace Kelly's eyes were breathtaking, a shade of blue so clear and vivid that they seemed almost unreal. They had a quiet intensity, capable of holding attention without effort. Men were drawn to them because they were more than just beautiful. They hinted at something deeper. Her gaze carried both elegance and mystery, making it impossible to look away. In her films, a single look could express longing, confidence, or quiet defiance, pulling audiences into her world. They weren't just eyes. They were a reflection of her charm, intelligence, and the undeniable allure that made her unforgettable. Farrah Fawcett was the most famous woman in America. She had the looks, the fame, and the success, until Hollywood turned its back on her. And when she needed the world most, it was too busy watching someone else. Small-town Texas to Hollywood dreams. Farrah Fawcett was born on February 2, 1947, in Corpus Christi, Texas. Even as a child, people took notice. Classmates, teachers, even strangers. She wasn't just beautiful. She had an effortless charisma that made her stand out. At W.B. Ray High School, she was voted Most Beautiful all 4 years, a school record. But beauty wasn't her focus. She had a sharp mind and planned to study microbiology at the University of Texas at Austin. That plan didn't last long. A photographer saw her yearbook picture and sent it to a Hollywood agent. Within weeks, she was flooded with modeling offers. Her parents were hesitant. Hollywood was unpredictable and they wanted stability for their daughter. But Farrah had options. She continued her studies, balancing classes with commercial shoots for beauty products and fashion campaigns. By 1968, she made the leap. She left Texas for Los Angeles with the goal of becoming an actress. Success didn't come overnight. She appeared in shampoo commercials, did minor TV guest spots, and took on small modeling gigs. Her first major contract was with Screen Gems, the studio behind Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie. It was a foot in the door, but big roles were still out of reach. Her first credited role came in 1969 on Mayberry RFD, followed by appearances on The Flying Nun and The Partridge Family. It wasn't glamorous, but it was work. She took whatever she could get, knowing all it took was one role to change everything. That role came in 1974 when she landed a recurring part on Harry O. She played Sue Ingram, the neighbor of the lead detective, for 8 episodes. The show got her noticed, but it wasn't enough to make her a household name. Then came The $6 Million Man. Cast as Steve Austin's love interest, she gained even more visibility. She also caught the attention of the show's star, Lee Majors. The two became inseparable, and by 1973, they were married. Majors was already an established TV star, and with his guidance, her career started moving faster. But no one, not even Farrah, was prepared for what came next. Becoming a superstar overnight. In 1976, Charlie's Angels premiered on ABC, and Farrah Fawcett became the most famous woman in America, practically overnight. The show was a phenomenon. Farrah, alongside Jaclyn Smith and Kate Jackson, played private detectives working for the unseen Charles Townsend. Her character, Jill Monroe, was the standout. Carefree, confident, and effortlessly cool, she wasn't just another TV character, she was a cultural icon. At the same time, her now famous red swimsuit poster hit stores. It sold 12 million copies, making it the most popular pinup of all time. Every teenage boy had it. Every woman wanted her hair. The Farrah flip became the most requested hairstyle in salons across the country. But behind the glamour, she was drowning in exhaustion. The TV schedule was brutal. 12 to 14-hour days, 6 days a week. On top of that, she had to do endless press tours, photo shoots, and public appearances. Hollywood loved her, but they also controlled her every move. Her marriage with Lee Majors suffered. He was still filming The $6 Million Man and expected her to be home by the time he finished work. She wasn't. By the end of the first season, she had a decision to make: continue on Charlie's Angels or leave at the peak of her success. She chose the latter. ABC wasn't happy. They sued her for breach of contract, demanding $7 million in damages. The case was messy, and ultimately she agreed to return for a few guest appearances to settle the lawsuit. The media called her crazy for leaving a hit show, but she didn't care. She wanted to prove she was more than just TV's golden girl. Hollywood, however, had other plans. Hollywood pushback and career struggles. Leaving Charlie's Angels should have been the moment Farrah Fawcett stepped into serious acting. Instead, it nearly ended her career. In 1978, she starred in Somebody Killed Her Husband, a suspense thriller meant to reinvent her image. The studio hyped it up as a Hitchcock-style mystery, but critics weren't buying it. Roger Ebert called it a slow-moving, uninspired mess. Audiences weren't interested either. The film bombed at the box office. It didn't just underperform, it humiliated her. Hollywood took it as proof she wasn't leading lady material. She was slapped with the dreaded TV actress label, a death sentence for credibility in film. Directors didn't see her as serious. Producers assumed she lacked depth. She was offered more fluff roles, light comedies, throwaway dramas, none of which aligned with what she wanted. Determined to shake the stigma, she tried again with Sunburn in 1979. It was a crime comedy pairing her with Charles Grodin. On paper, it looked promising. In reality, it was another misfire. Critics were unimpressed. Audiences barely noticed. Farrah's second attempt at big screen stardom fizzled out just as quickly as the first. By the early 80s, she was at a crossroads. The industry didn't respect her, and her career had lost momentum. But instead of accepting defeat, she took a risk no one saw coming. She pivoted to Broadway. In 1983, she took on the lead role in Extremities, a brutal, emotionally charged play about a woman fighting back against an attacker. It was the polar opposite of anything she'd done before: raw, violent, and deeply disturbing. Hollywood had never given her material like this, so she found it herself. The response? Explosive. Audiences were stunned. Critics finally saw her as a real actress. The New York Times praised her performance as harrowing and fearless. She earned standing ovations nightly. For the first time in her career, no one was talking about her hair, her looks, or her past as an angel. They were talking about her talent. Forgotten film career. Farrah Fawcett will always be remembered for Charlie's Angels, but many forget that she continued working well into the 90s and 2000s. Taking on challenging roles that rarely got the recognition they deserved. After her Golden Globe nomination for Extremities in 1986, she was finally being taken seriously as an actress. She continued her streak of gritty, dramatic roles in TV movies, including Poor Little Rich Girl, The Barbara Hutton Story, 1987, Double Exposure, The Story of Margaret Bourke-White, 1989, and Small Sacrifices, 1989. The latter, based on true events, had her portraying Diane Downs, a mother convicted of shooting her own children. The role earned her another Golden Globe nomination and critical praise. In the 90s, she continued choosing projects that broke away from her sex symbol image. One of her most daring roles was in Robert Duvall's 1997 film The Apostle, where she played the estranged wife of a troubled preacher. The film was highly praised by critics, with many calling it one of the best performances of her career. But even with acclaim, it was clear that Hollywood wasn't offering her the same big-budget films that other actresses of her era were getting. Still, she worked steadily. Her 2000 TV movie, Jewel, was another strong performance, earning her a third Golden Globe nomination for her portrayal of a mother raising a child with Down syndrome. By the early 2000s, though, work slowed down. The industry was changing. Younger actresses dominated Hollywood, and casting directors were less interested in veteran stars. She made headlines more for her personal life than for her career. By the mid-2000s, offers dwindled. Her last major acting credit was a guest appearance on The Guardian in 2003, for which she received an Emmy nomination, a reminder that her talent never faded even if the industry moved on. Lee Majors, Ryan O'Neal, and a public scandal. Farrah Fawcett and Lee Majors looked like Hollywood's golden couple, but behind the scenes their marriage was unraveling. By the late 1970s, they were more like roommates than partners. Majors had traditional expectations. He wanted a wife waiting at home when he finished work. Farrah, however, was the biggest TV star in America, balancing grueling filming schedules, promotional tours, and endless magazine covers. The time apart was too much. By 1979, they had unofficially separated. The breakup wasn't ugly, but it was inevitable. Farrah had outgrown the role of the doting wife, and Majors couldn't accept her skyrocketing fame. Their divorce was finalized in 1982, but Farrah had already moved on to Ryan O'Neal. Ryan O'Neal and Farrah Fawcett's relationship was a Hollywood roller coaster, passionate, volatile, and endlessly complicated. They first got together in 1979, shortly after her split from Lee Majors. Ryan was already a major star, known for Love Story, 1970, and Barry Lyndon, 1975. Their chemistry was instant, but so was the drama. For years, they were one of Hollywood's most talked-about couples, but behind the scenes things weren't as glamorous. Their relationship was off and on for decades, marked by explosive fights, reconciliations, and long periods of separation. In 1997, they briefly split after Ryan admitted to cheating on her, but no matter how many times they walked away, they always seemed to find their way back. Friends described them as madly in love but constantly at war. O'Neal later admitted, "Farrah and I fought like a couple of lions." And they did. Screaming matches, breakups that never lasted, and moments of bliss that never lasted either. When Farrah was diagnosed with cancer in 2006, Ryan became her primary caregiver. He stood by her side through grueling treatments, hospital visits, and painful setbacks. He later admitted, "I never left her side for 3 years." As her condition worsened, Ryan publicly announced his intention to marry her. He told the press, "I will ask her to marry me again. We will." But time was not on their side. By the time he formally proposed, Farrah was too weak to respond. He later reflected, "She never said yes, but she didn't say no." A mother's heartbreak and legal battles. She had faced career setbacks, industry battles, and a highly publicized love life, but nothing compared to the pain of watching her only son, Redmond ONeal, spiral out of control. Born on January 30th, 1985, Redmond was the child of two Hollywood icons, Farrah and Ryan O'Neal. From the outside, he had every advantage: wealth, privilege, and parents who could open doors most could only dream of. But his reality was far from glamorous. Even as a child, those close to the family saw signs of trouble. He struggled with anger, impulse control, and drug experimentation at a young age. By his teenage years, his rap sheet was growing faster than his resume. Arrests for heroin possession, DUIs, probation violations, and drug-related incidents became routine. Each time Farrah stepped in, paying for rehab, hiring the best lawyers, and pulling strings to keep him out of prison. But no amount of money or influence could stop the cycle. One of the most gut-wrenching moments came in 2008, when Farrah was fighting for her life. Redmond had been arrested again, this time for drug possession while on probation. She was too sick to appear in court, but she made sure her voice was heard. Through her representatives, she begged the judge for leniency, urging the court to give her son another chance. "The one thing I will never give up on is Redmond," she said. Redmond continued his run-ins with the law, bouncing in and out of rehab and prison. In 2018, he was arrested again, this time for attempted murder, armed robbery, and drug possession. Authorities described him as a danger to society. Cancer, media intrusion, and the final fight. In 2006, Farrah Fawcett was diagnosed with anal cancer, a rare and aggressive disease. She kept it private at first, confiding in close friends and family while undergoing radiation and chemotherapy at the renowned Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. She approached treatment with the same determination that had fueled her career, refusing to let the illness define her. By 2007, there was a glimmer of hope. Her doctors confirmed that the cancer was in remission. It seemed like she had won. But just months later, in May 2007, the disease returned. And this time, it was worse. The cancer had spread to her liver, making conventional treatment less effective. Farrah wasn't willing to accept defeat. She sought experimental treatments in Germany, where doctors offered cutting-edge therapies not yet approved in the U.S. She endured painful stem cell treatments, embolization procedures, and alternative therapies, anything that might give her a chance. While she fought for her life, the media turned her illness into a spectacle. Paparazzi stalked her at hospitals, snapping photos of her in moments meant to be private. Then came the ultimate invasion. Her confidential medical records were leaked to the press. The public suddenly knew details about her treatment, prognosis, and declining health before she could even process them herself. Farrah fought back. She sued the UCLA Medical Center where an employee had illegally accessed her records. The hospital admitted to the breach and multiple staff members were fired. But the damage was already done. Despite the chaos, she decided to take control of her own story. She filmed her battle, raw and unfiltered, turning the footage into a documentary, Farrah's Story. When it aired in May 2009, it was watched by 9 million people. Audiences saw her pain, her determination, and her refusal to let cancer steal her dignity. But by the time the special aired, her fight was nearly over. The world had just witnessed her final battle, and there was nothing left to do but wait. Her time was running out. The overlooked goodbye. On June 25, 2009, Farrah Fawcett lost her battle with cancer at 62 years old. It wasn't a sudden death. Her health had been deteriorating for months. Those closest to her knew the end was near. She spent her final days in a hospital in Santa Monica, surrounded by a few loved ones. Ryan O'Neal never left her side. Her only son, Redmond ONeal, was in jail at the time. Despite his legal troubles, authorities granted him a brief visit to say goodbye. He arrived in an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs, escorted by law enforcement. It was a heartbreaking sight. His mother dying in a hospital bed, while he sat at her side, shackled. The moment was brief, but it was all he was allowed. The world had followed Farrah's cancer battle through her self-produced documentary, Farrah's Story, which aired just 6 weeks before her death. Nearly 9 million people tuned in to watch her unfiltered struggle. It was raw, emotional, and gave the public a first-hand look at her strength. Despite her vulnerability, she refused to let her illness define her. Early that morning, news of her passing spread. Hollywood prepared tributes, TV networks planned retrospectives, and fans mourned. But within hours, everything changed. That same afternoon, Michael Jackson was pronounced dead. The biggest pop star in the world, gone at 50 years old, the news cycle immediately shifted. Every major network, website, and newspaper dropped their planned Farrah tributes to cover Jackson's sudden death instead. His passing became a global media event. Farrah's death, once front-page news, was now an afterthought. By evening, she was barely a headline. For many, the timing felt unfair. Here was a woman who had spent years fighting for respect beyond her looks, and in her final moments, she was once again pushed to the background. Her funeral was small and private, held at the Cathedral of Our Lady of the Angels in Los Angeles. Ryan O'Neal was there, devastated. Redmond was escorted in chains, allowed to attend under strict supervision. The media might have moved on quickly, but those who truly loved her never forgot. To them, she wasn't just a TV icon, she was a fighter, a mother, a woman who refused to be defined by anyone else's narrative. Her final battle wasn't just against cancer, it was against the way the world saw her. The fight over Farrah's fortune. Farrah Fawcett built a legacy worth $20 million, but when she passed in 2009, her estate didn't rest peacefully. Instead, it became a high-profile legal battle that exposed tensions between her closest relationships and revealed surprises about her final wishes. Her will was meticulously planned. She ensured her son, Redmond ONeal, received $4.5 million in a protected trust, guaranteeing financial support despite his legal troubles and struggles with addiction. Portions of her estate also went to charities, close friends, and her alma mater, the University of Texas at Austin. But one name was missing: Ryan O'Neal. Despite being her on-again, off-again partner for 3 decades, Ryan wasn't listed as a beneficiary. He didn't receive money, property, or any official part of her estate. It was a shocking omission, fueling speculation about where their relationship truly stood at the time of her passing. The biggest dispute centered around a priceless Andy Warhol painting of Farrah, estimated to be worth millions. The University of Texas claimed she had left it to them as part of her final wishes. Ryan, however, disagreed completely. He insisted the painting was his, stating that Farrah had personally gifted it to him years earlier. The university wasn't backing down. They sued Ryan for possession, arguing that the painting was legally theirs and should remain in their collection. The legal battle dragged on for years, with Ryan fiercely contesting the claim. By 2013, a jury ruled in Ryan's favor, allowing him to keep the Warhol portrait. The decision was controversial, reigniting debates about whether Farrah had truly wanted him to have it, or if he had simply taken it after her death. Even though he won the case, the fight over the painting left unanswered questions. Had Farrah purposely left Ryan out of her will? Had their relationship deteriorated more than he publicly admitted? What should have been a straightforward estate settlement became yet another chapter of turmoil in her story. Even in death, Farrah Fawcett's legacy was not left in peace. You're watching this thanks to Hedy Lamarr. No, really. The woman once dubbed too beautiful to be smart helped create the foundation for Wi-Fi and then vanished from history. A wild start in Vienna. Before she was a Hollywood icon or a tech trailblazer, Hedy Lamarr was Hedwig Kiesler, a teenager causing chaos in 1930s Vienna. She was born in 1914 to Jewish parents in a wealthy, cultured household. Her father took her on walks explaining how machines worked. Her mother pushed her into piano and ballet, but none of that made headlines. What did? A little film called Ecstasy. At 18, she starred in the 1933 Czech film Ecstasy. It became one of the most talked-about movies in Europe, not for the plot, but for the scenes. Hedy appeared in scenes that included a brief moment of swimming unclothed and a later shot that implied a moment of intimacy. It was subtle by today's standards, but back then it was explosive. Censors in Germany banned it. The Vatican called it sinful. U.S. customs officials blocked it at the ports. But the buzz made her famous overnight. She wasn't just an actress now, she was a scandal. People talked about the film like it was forbidden fruit. Hedy said later she didn't know how intense it would look. She claimed the director tricked her, filming some shots without her full consent. That didn't stop the world from labeling her the naked girl. She returned to Austria and kept working on stage, but the Ecstasy image followed her everywhere. It attracted one powerful admirer, Fritz Mandl, a wealthy arms dealer. He saw the film and became obsessed. He courted her relentlessly, and eventually she gave in. They married in 1933. She was just 19. He was controlling, jealous, and insanely rich. He tried to buy up every copy of ecstasy in existence, just to destroy them. Hetty went from international headline to a locked-down trophy wife in a mansion filled with war talk and Nazi guests. She wasn't even allowed to act anymore, but she was listening, watching, planning, and when she left, she didn't just walk, she disappeared like a pro. That's where things get wild. Trapped in a marriage. Fritz Mandl had money, power, and political ties. Hetty had beauty, brains, and no idea what she'd walked into. Their wedding in 1933 looked lavish from the outside, but inside, it was a cage. Fritz wasn't just rich, he was obsessed. He treated Hetty like a possession. She couldn't go anywhere without permission. He hired staff to monitor her. He even tried to erase her past, buying up reels of ecstasy and burning them. Mandl's empire made weapons. His company supplied arms to Italy, Austria, even Nazi Germany. And while Hetty was banned from acting, she was forced to attend his business dinners. These weren't just awkward cocktail parties. They were filled with top generals, arms designers, and heads of state. Hetty sat quiet, beautiful, and absorbing everything. She later said, "I listened carefully. It was second nature. She learned about military tech, radio control systems, and flaws in torpedoes. Stuff no Hollywood starlet was supposed to know." Meanwhile, her marriage kept getting darker. Mandl's jealousy turned to control. He installed guards at the gates and staff inside the home. He dictated her clothes. He spied on her letters, and when she protested, he shut her down, so she got clever. Over time, she won back tiny bits of freedom, enough to plan. She studied his schedule. She saved money. She even trained her maid to mimic her voice to buy time if someone called while she was gone. Then one night, she dressed as the maid and slipped out of the mansion. She made it to Paris with jewelry sewn into her coat. She didn't just run, she vanished. No note, no goodbye, just gone. By the time Mandl noticed, she was meeting with Louis B. Mayer in London, charming him into a contract with MGM. When she boarded that ship to America, Mayer wanted her to go by a new name. She chose Lamar, after silent film actress Barbara Lamar. By the time the boat docked in New York, she wasn't the scandalous Hedwig anymore. She was Hetty Lamar. Escape in disguise. After escaping her marriage, she arrived in London in 1937 with one goal: Hollywood. She tracked down Louis B. Mayer, head of MGM, and pitched herself. He wasn't impressed at first. He thought she was too much scandal, not enough substance. So she pulled a power move. She booked a spot on the same ship Mayer and his wife were taking to New York. Mid-Atlantic, she showed up in full glam and made her pitch again, this time at sea. It worked. He offered her a contract on the spot. Mayer wanted to change her name to distance her from ecstasy. Hetty picked Lamar as a nod to Barbara Lamar, a silent-era star who had died young. The name stuck. When that ship landed in New York, reporters were already waiting. Exotic new European beauty was the angle. Hetty played along. MGM immediately marketed her as the most beautiful woman in the world. Not actress, not talent, just beautiful. That's what they sold, and it worked. Her debut in Algiers, 1938, was all about the look, soft lighting, close-ups, mystery. Audiences couldn't look away. But Hetty wasn't content with being a face. She wanted real roles, real control. MGM kept her in exotic parts, foreign princesses, mysterious seductresses, and she kept drawing crowds. Behind the scenes, she worked hard. She studied English intensively, perfected her accent, and learned the business. But the roles stayed the same. Studio heads didn't care that she was smart. They wanted glamour shots, not ideas. Meanwhile, she never forgot what she'd seen back in Austria: radio signals, weapon systems, war machines. That knowledge stayed with her. By day, she was a movie star. By night, she read books on electronics and engineering. Hollywood's most beautiful weapon. In the late 1930s and early 40s, Hetty Lamar owned the screen. Her breakout role in Algiers made her a sensation. Fans couldn't get enough of the Austrian accent, the flawless face, and that distant, mysterious look MGM worked so hard to frame. She wasn't just famous, she was everywhere. Magazines, billboards, even painted on World War II fighter planes. But while America fell in love with her image, the roles didn't evolve. She was cast over and over as the exotic woman, a pattern that followed her in films like Lady of the Tropics and White Cargo. The studio kept her locked into characters that looked great but rarely spoke more than a few lines of real substance. She pushed back. She asked for better scripts. MGM didn't care. She was loaned out to other studios, often without warning. She was treated like property, just a beautiful asset. But behind closed doors, she was restless and curious. She was fascinated by how things worked, especially machines. At home, she set up a mini lab in her trailer. She read engineering books between scenes. She even kept a drafting table near her bed. Hetty later said, "I have no idea why people got the impression I had brains." But she did, and they were working overtime. By the early 40s, America had entered the war. Hetty wanted to help, but the military wasn't interested in her tech ideas. They told her to sell war bonds instead, so she did, raising millions. But she didn't stop thinking. She started looking for someone who could help her build what she was dreaming up. She was about to step way out of her movie star box and walk right into history. Rejected by the war effort. Hetty Lamar was tired of being told to smile and wave. She wanted to help the war effort, really help, and she had the knowledge to do it. She teamed up with George Antheil, an experimental composer best known for syncing player pianos in wild performances. Hetty told him she had an idea to stop enemy torpedoes from being jammed. Radio-controlled weapons were getting thrown off course because the enemy could intercept and block the signal. She wanted to fix that. Her solution? Change the signal constantly so it couldn't be tracked or jammed. A frequency-hopping system. Hetty said it would work like a player piano roll, jumping between frequencies in sync. George figured out how to make that work using piano rolls and tiny mechanical parts. In 1942, they filed U.S. patent number 2,292,387. It was officially titled Secret Communication System. The patent was granted, and they handed it straight to the Navy, but the Navy said no. They thought it was too complex, too impractical. And maybe, though no one said it out loud, they didn't take a glamorous actress and an avant-garde musician seriously. So instead of building it, they shelved it. Meanwhile, Hetty kept acting and raising war bonds. She once auctioned off a kiss for $25,000. She toured the country, charming crowds, posing for photos, and quietly fuming that her actual invention was gathering dust in a filing cabinet. She could have tried to push the invention harder, but back then, it just wasn't done. The studio owned her schedule. The government ignored her patent, and in the public eye, she was still the pretty face from Algiers. But the idea didn't die. The Navy buried her invention. Hetty's patent sat untouched for years. The Navy filed it away during World War II and never built the device. Their excuse? It was impractical. Too complicated. They didn't like that it used a piano roll. Never mind that the science was solid. The truth? They just didn't take it seriously. A movie star and a composer handing them military tech? Not exactly what they were expecting. Hetty never made a dime from it. No royalties, no licensing deals. The patent expired in 1959. After that, the government and private companies were free to use the idea however they wanted. And they did. In the 1960s, the U.S. military quietly started using frequency-hopping tech, first in secure communication systems, then in missile guidance. Over time, that same concept became the backbone for things we all use today: Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, even some early forms of GPS. Engineers building this tech never knew where it came from. Some didn't find out for decades. When they finally did, surprise. Hetty Lamar was the name on the paperwork. She said nothing about it publicly. No press tours, no lawsuits. She just let it go. Maybe she thought no one would believe her, or maybe she was just used to being ignored. While her invention was changing the world, she was still being offered the same tired film roles: seductive, mysterious, beautiful, always beautiful, never brilliant. In interviews, she hinted at the frustration. She once said, "Any girl can be glamorous. All you have to do is stand still and look stupid." She knew exactly how the world saw her, and she was done trying to fight it. By the late 50s, her movie offers were drying up. Studios were moving on. She was aging out of the roles they'd always given her. She didn't fit the box anymore. Hollywood had used her face. The military had used her ideas, and both walked away without saying thank you. Box office bombshell and backlash. In 1949, Samson and Delilah hit theaters and exploded at the box office. Hetty played Delilah, the femme fatale who betrays the biblical strongman. The film raked in millions and became the top-grossing movie of the year. This should have been her moment. Instead, it was her peak and the beginning of the end. The studios still boxed her into one role, the irresistible beauty. She wanted more, so she took a risk. She started producing her own films, rare for any woman in Hollywood, let alone one with her reputation. Her first try was The Strange Woman, 1946, where she played a complex, morally gray character. It wasn't a flop, but it wasn't a hit either. Critics didn't know what to do with it, or with her. Still, she pushed forward. Then came Dishonored Lady and Loves of Three Queens. These were personal projects. She had a say in the script, the direction, the wardrobe. Finally, she was calling the shots. Hollywood didn't like that. Behind the scenes, producers called her difficult. Some said she was moody or too involved. Translation, she was smart and had opinions. That didn't fly in a male-run industry. Studios stopped calling. The headlines turned cold. She went from star to has-been almost overnight. By the late 50s, she was done with MGM. Her last few films went nowhere. Roles dried up. Fans moved on. And Hollywood, as always, was brutal to aging actresses, especially ones who pushed back. Hetty tried TV, she tried writing, she even tried selling beauty products under her name. Nothing stuck. She had spent years fighting for better roles, better stories, and basic respect. And in the end, she was forced out. But she didn't crash, she faded. She once said, "I've been everything, you know? I've been a glamorous woman, a producer, an inventor, but people still only ask me about my face." She wasn't wrong, and soon that face, so famous, so admired, would be plastered across headlines again. Not for a movie, but for something that would follow her for the rest of her life. Scandal in a drugstore. In 1966, Hedy Lamarr's name was back in the papers, but not for a comeback. She was arrested in Los Angeles for shoplifting. The charge? Stealing $86 worth of items from a department store. Headlines lit up, "Screen Beauty Caught Stealing. Hedy Lamarr booked on theft." She denied it all, said it was a misunderstanding. A clerk claimed she left without paying. Hedy said she thought the items were being held for her at the register. She was released on bail, but the damage was done. The tabloids ran wild. Photographers caught her leaving court in dark glasses. The press had a field day dragging a former star through the mud. She was cleared in court. The charges were dropped, but it didn't matter. The public had already made up its mind. It wasn't the first time. Just a few years earlier, she'd filed a $10 million lawsuit against Warner Brothers for using her name in Blazing Saddles without permission. The character Hedy Lamarr was a running joke in the film. She wasn't amused. They settled out of court. By the late 60s and into the 70s, Hedy mostly disappeared from public life. She struggled with finances. There were more arrests, more lawsuits, plastic surgery mishaps, a tell-all book ghostwritten under her name filled with made-up stories she later denied ever saying. She became a punchline. The press called her troubled, bizarre, even delusional. Nobody mentioned the Navy patent. Nobody talked about frequency hopping or tech inventions. She gave fewer and fewer interviews. When she did speak, she sounded fed up. "The world isn't kind to people who outlive their fame," she once said. She had been glamorized, typecast, ignored, used, mocked, and now forgotten. Inventor recognition comes too late. By the 1990s, tech insiders started asking, who actually came up with frequency hopping? Then someone dug up the old patent, and there it was, Hedy Keesler Markey, Lamarr's married name at the time. the co-inventor of a key communication breakthrough, the same woman from Samson and Delilah. The news spread fast. Suddenly, Hedy Lamarr wasn't just a former actress. She was a pioneer, an inventor, a woman whose ideas helped shape the modern tech world. In 1997, the Electronic Frontier Foundation gave her a special award for her contribution to secure communications. She didn't show up in person. She accepted by phone from Florida. Her voice was quiet but clear. She said, "It's about time." That same year, Forbes ran a story calling her the mother of Wi-Fi. But still, no money. The patent had long expired, and companies had been profiting from the technology for years. She didn't chase lawsuits. She didn't hire agents. She mostly stayed home, out of sight, living alone and answering fan mail when she felt like it. The press tried to frame it as a redemption arc. Forgotten star gets her due. But Hedy didn't play along. She didn't do long interviews, no grand tours or acceptance speeches. She said she felt honored, yes, but she also felt used. "The brains of people are more interesting than the looks," she once told a reporter. "I think that's the way it should be." Her recognition was real, but it came too late to change much. She was no longer interested in spotlight moments. She just wanted peace. One of her last public acts, she recorded an autobiography by phone. From her home in Florida, she told her story chapter by chapter, memory by memory. It wasn't polished, it wasn't PR approved, but it was hers. The final gasp. Hedy Lamarr died on January 19, 2000 at age 85, alone in her Florida home. No red carpet, no flashbulbs, just the quiet exit of a woman the world never fully understood. Her kids scattered her ashes in Austria, honoring her wish to return home. Not to Hollywood, but to the country she'd once escaped. She left no fortune, no mansion, just a trail of films, a defunct patent, and an uncashed check of overdue recognition. In her final years, she'd become a recluse. She rarely left the house, avoided cameras, and only spoke by phone. But when she did speak, she was sharp, blunt, funny, still very heady. She joked about plastic surgery, told off reporters, and kept every letter from fans who still remembered her beyond the scandals. She didn't want fame back. She wanted truth, real acknowledgement. And slowly, she got it. After her death, tributes started rolling in, late but sincere. Documentaries were made, books were written. Her 1942 invention became a case study in how women's ideas were buried for decades. She was finally being taught in tech history, not just screened in film classes. In 2014, she was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame, not for ecstasy, not for Samson and Delilah, but for changing the way the modern world connects, literally. Her story is now a warning and a wake-up call. Beauty fades, but brilliance should never be dismissed. She never liked being underestimated. "The world thinks I'm stupid," she once said. "But I'm not. I just played that way." She wasn't just a screen siren, or a scandal, or a pretty face. She was a woman who lived 5 lives in one and left behind a legacy that still runs in every phone, every GPS signal, every wireless network. No flash, no filter, just facts. Hedy Lamarr, the woman who left nothing to the imagination, gave the world far more than it ever gave her back. A tale that schools somehow forgot to put on the menu. The Cinderella story, from poverty to stardom. Once upon a time, in the land of pizza, pasta, and Pavarotti, a young girl named Sofia Viviani Ciccolone was born. But this wasn't your typical fairy tale beginning. No, young Sofia's life was more like a bowl of overcooked spaghetti, tangled, messy, and far from al dente. Born in the Clinica Regina Margherita in Rome, Italy, on September 20th, 1934, Sofia's early life was marred by poverty and war. Her father was as absent as a meatball in a vegetarian restaurant, and her mother struggled to make ends meet. They lived in Poggioli, near Naples, in her grandmother's small apartment, where the only thing tighter than space was their budget. But like a perfectly baked lasagna, layers of talent and determination were hidden beneath the surface. Sophia's beauty caught the eye of many, but it was her passion for acting that set her on the path to stardom. From extra roles to beauty pageants, she hustled her way through the Italian film industry, changing her name to Sophia Loren along the way because, let's face it, Ciccolone doesn't quite roll off the tongue like a fine Chianti. Her big break came when she met the renowned producer Carlo Ponti, a man who saw in her not just a pretty face but a powerhouse of talent. Together they embarked on a journey that would take Sophia from the humble streets of Pozzuoli to the glittering stages of Hollywood. Sophia's rise to fame was like a perfectly timed risotto, slow, steady, and worth every minute. She became an icon, a symbol of Italian cinema, and a woman who defied the odds, and all this without a fairy godmother or a magical pumpkin carriage, just pure grit, talent, and a sprinkle of Italian charm. But if you think this rags-to-riches story is the most intriguing part of Sophia's life, then buckle up, dear viewer, because what comes next is a love affair so captivating it could make Romeo and Juliet look like a casual fling. Ready to dive into the romance that rocked the world? Stay tuned, because the next chapter is a love story fit for the silver screen. Ah, Hollywood, the land of glitz, glamour, and beauty standards that could make even a supermodel feel like a potato. But when Sophia Loren strutted into Tinseltown, she brought with her a secret ingredient that left everyone's jaws on the red carpet. What was it, you ask? Was it a magical potion, a secret serum? Nope. It was something far more Italian: confidence, authenticity, and a love for pasta. You see, Sophia Loren's beauty was as unique as a truffle in a sea of mushrooms. Her voluptuous figure, dark hair, and striking features were a far cry from the typical Hollywood starlet of the time. While others were sipping on diet shakes and counting calories, Sophia was indulging in her favorite Italian dishes and embracing her natural beauty. Her famous quote, "Everything you see, I owe to spaghetti," wasn't just a witty one-liner. It was a testament to her belief that beauty comes from being true to oneself. And let's be honest, if spaghetti can make you look like Sophia Loren, then pass the Parmesan, please. But Sophia's beauty wasn't just skin deep. Her confidence and authenticity shone through in her performances, making her a standout in an industry that often valued appearance over substance. She refused to conform to Hollywood's narrow standards, turning down offers to change her name or undergo plastic surgery. In an era where many actresses were molded to fit a certain mold, Sophia was a breath of fresh air, as refreshing as a scoop of gelato on a hot Italian summer day. Her approach to beauty and self-care was simple yet revolutionary. She believed in natural remedies like olive oil baths and a good night's sleep, practices that were as Italian as a perfectly tossed pizza. Sophia's beauty routine was less about hiding flaws and more about celebrating what made her unique, and celebrate she did. Sophia Loren became a symbol of timeless beauty, an icon who defied the norms and showed the world that true allure comes from embracing who you are. Her beauty secret wasn't hidden in a bottle or a surgeon's office. It was in her attitude, her love for life, and her ability to enjoy a hearty plate of pasta without a shred of guilt. But wait until you hear about the love story that swept her off her feet. A romance so grand it could make a Hollywood scriptwriter blush. Ready to dive into a love affair for the ages? Stay tuned, because what comes next is amore on a whole new level. A love affair for the ages, the untold story of Sophia and Carlo Ponti. Love. It's the stuff of legends, the inspiration for countless poems, songs, and cheesy romantic comedies. But when it came to Sophia Loren and Carlo Ponti, love wasn't just a fleeting emotion. It was an epic tale that could rival any Shakespearean drama. A love story so grand it makes Cinderella's glass slipper look like a fashion faux pas. Carlo Ponti, a renowned film producer, first spotted Sophia Loren in a beauty pageant. It was a moment that could only be described as love at first sight, or perhaps love at first cannoli, considering their shared Italian heritage. Sophia was a rising star, and Carlo was a man with a vision. Together, they were a match made in cinematic heaven. But like any great love story, theirs was not without its twists and turns. Carlo was, unfortunately, already married, and divorce was as rare in Italy as a bad espresso. The legal entanglements were more tangled than a bowl of overcooked linguine, but love, as they say, finds a way. The couple navigated the legal maze with the finesse of a gondolier gliding through the canals of Venice. They became French citizens, allowing Carlo to obtain a divorce and marry Sofia in 1957. It was a move that raised eyebrows and made headlines, but for Sofia and Carlo, it was a testament to their commitment and love for each other. Their relationship was more than just a romantic connection. It was a partnership that shaped both their careers. Carlo produced many of Sofia's films, guiding her to international stardom, while Sofia became Carlo's muse, inspiring him to create cinematic magic. Through the years, their love endured the pressures of fame, the scrutiny of the media, and even legal battles. They stood by each other as steadfast as the Leaning Tower of Pisa, minus the leaning part, of course. Their love was genuine, passionate, and as enduring as a well-aged Parmigiano Reggiano. But what comes next is a night filled with glamour, excitement, and a scandal that could only happen in Hollywood. Ready to step into the glitzy world of the Oscars? Stay tuned, because the next chapter is a night to remember, with a twist that you won't see coming. The Oscar night scandal, when Sofia almost missed her big win. The Oscars, a night where stars shine brighter than a freshly polished Vespa, and dreams come true on a stage adorned with golden statuettes. But for Sophia Loren, the night of her big win was almost a missed opportunity. A near disaster that could have turned her Cinderella moment into a pumpkin mishap. It was the year 1962, and Sofia was nominated for Best Actress for her role in La Chiocciara, Two Women. The buzz around her performance was as electric as a Roman thunderstorm, but Sofia was skeptical. The thought of losing on live television was as appealing as a burnt tiramisu, so she decided to skip the ceremony and stay in Italy. But fate, like a persistent Italian nonna, had other plans. As the ceremony unfolded, Sofia's name was announced as the winner, making her the first actor to win an Oscar for a non-English speaking role. The applause was thunderous, but the winner's seat was as empty as a wine barrel after a village feast. The news reached Sofia in Italy, and her reaction was a mix of shock, joy, and a dash of "Mamma Mia!" She later received her Oscar in a more private setting. But the story of her almost missed win became a legendary tale in Hollywood. Sofia's Oscar win wasn't just a personal triumph. It was a milestone for international cinema. Her performance broke barriers and opened doors for non-English-speaking actors, proving that talent knows no language barriers. It was a win for diversity, a win for authenticity, and a win for spaghetti lovers everywhere. But wait, if you think Sofia's culinary talents are limited to enjoying pasta, you're in for a tasty surprise. Ready to step into Sofia's kitchen and discover the culinary talents of a screen legend? The next chapter is a feast for the senses, and trust me, it's deliciously entertaining. Cooking with Sofia, the culinary talents of a screen legend. Sofia Loren, a name synonymous with elegance, beauty, and unparalleled acting prowess. But did you know that this silver screen goddess could whip up a feast that would make even the most seasoned Italian chef tip his hat? That's right, Sofia's talents extended beyond the camera and into the kitchen, where she danced with pots and pans as gracefully as she did with her co-stars. Growing up in Italy, Sofia's love for food was nurtured by her grandmother, who taught her the art of cooking as if it were a sacred family tradition. For Sofia, food wasn't just sustenance. It was a connection to her roots, a celebration of her culture, and a way to bring people together. Her culinary skills were no secret to those close to her, but it was her cookbook, In the Kitchen with Love, that brought her gastronomic talents to the world. Released in 1972, the book was a delightful collection of recipes, anecdotes, and Sofia's philosophy on food. It was like a guided tour of Italy's culinary landscape, led by none other than the dazzling diva herself. From mouth-watering pasta dishes to delectable desserts, Sofia's recipes were a reflection of her personality, bold, authentic, and full of zest. She believed in using fresh ingredients, cooking with love, and enjoying food without guilt. Her approach to cooking was as natural and unpretentious as her acting, a refreshing departure from the often elitist world of gourmet cuisine. But Sophia's love for food wasn't just confined to her kitchen. She often spoke about the joy of eating, the importance of family meals, and the magic of sharing food with loved ones. Her famous quote, "The most indispensable ingredient of all good home cooking, love for those you are cooking for," encapsulated her belief that food was more than just flavors and textures. It was an expression of affection. Sophia Loren's culinary talents added another layer to her multifaceted persona, painting a picture of a woman who was as comfortable with a spatula as she was with a script. Her love for food was a testament to her authenticity, her connection to her roots, and her ability to find joy in the simple pleasures of life. But as we savor the delightful flavors of Sophia's culinary journey, a storm is brewing on the horizon, a legal battle so intense it could make a pot of boiling pasta look like a gentle simmer. Curious to know how Sophia Loren took on the Italian government and what was at stake, the next chapter is a legal thriller with a twist, and trust me, it's a dish best served hot. The legal battle, how Sophia Loren took on the Italian government. In the glamorous world of Hollywood, legal battles are as common as sequined gowns on the red carpet. But when Sophia Loren found herself entangled in a legal showdown with the Italian government, it was a plot twist that could rival any courtroom drama. The story begins in 1974 when Sophia was accused of tax evasion by the Italian authorities. Now, we all know that dealing with taxes can be as confusing as trying to decipher an Italian opera without subtitles, but this was no ordinary tax dispute. This was a battle that pitted one of Italy's most beloved stars against the very country that had nurtured her talent. The charges were serious and the stakes were high. Sophia was accused of underreporting her income, a claim that she vehemently denied. The legal proceedings were as intricate as a handcrafted Venetian lace with twists and turns that kept everyone on the edge of their seats. Sophia's defense was as passionate as one of her on-screen performances. She argued her case with the conviction of a woman who knew she was in the right. But the Italian legal system was a labyrinthine maze, and Sophia found herself caught in a web of bureaucracy and legal technicalities. The trial dragged on, turning into a spectacle that captured the attention of the media and the public. Sophia's reputation was on the line, and the pressure was as intense as a Neapolitan espresso. But through it all, she remained poised, dignified, and unyielding in her pursuit of justice. In a shocking turn of events, Sophia was found guilty and sentenced to 30 days in prison. It was a verdict that sent shockwaves through Italy and the world. The idea of an icon like Sophia Loren behind bars was as unthinkable as a pizza without cheese. But Sophia's story doesn't end in despair. She served her sentence with grace, turning her time in prison into a period of reflection and growth. Her legal battle became a symbol of her resilience, her unwavering belief in her innocence, and her commitment to standing up for what she believed in. Sophia's legal battle with the Italian government was more than just a headline-grabbing saga. It was a testament to her character, her integrity, and her indomitable spirit. It was a chapter in her life that revealed the strength and courage of a woman who was not afraid to take on the system and fight for her truth. But if you think this legal battle is the most dramatic part of Sophia's life, brace yourself. Up next is a tale of love, struggle, and triumph that will tug at your heartstrings. Ready to explore Sophia's journey into motherhood and the challenges she faced. The next chapter is a heartfelt story that will leave you inspired and moved. A mother's love, Sophia's struggle and triumph in motherhood. Motherhood, a role that's as challenging as it is rewarding, a journey filled with love, sacrifice, and moments that can melt even the coldest of hearts. For Sophia Loren, becoming a mother was a dream that she cherished, but it was a dream that came with its share of trials and tribulations. Sophia's desire to have children was as strong as her love for acting, but fate had other plans. She suffered through multiple miscarriages, each one a heartbreaking setback that tested her resilience and strength. The pain of losing a child is a wound that never truly heals, and Sophia's struggle was a poignant reminder of the fragility of life. But Sophia was not one to give up easily. Her determination to become a mother was as unbreakable as her on-screen persona. She sought medical help, explored options, and never lost hope. Her journey was a testament to her faith, her courage, and her unwavering belief in the power of love. Finally, in 1968, Sophia's dream came true when she gave birth to her first son, Carlo Ponti Jr. The joy of holding her child in her arms was a moment that transcended all her previous successes and accolades. It was a triumph that was personal, intimate, and profoundly moving. A few years later, Sophia welcomed her second son, Eduardo Ponti, into the world. Her family was complete, and her happiness knew no bounds. Sophia embraced motherhood with the same passion and grace that she brought to her acting. She was a hands-on mother, involved in every aspect of her children's lives, nurturing them with love, wisdom, and a touch of Italian flair. Sophia's journey into motherhood was not a fairy tale. It was a real, raw, and often painful experience. But it was a journey that she undertook with dignity, perseverance, and an unshakable belief in the power of love. Her story is a reminder that dreams do come true, but they often require faith, courage, and the strength to overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. The unbreakable bond, Sophia's relationship with Cary Grant. In the glitzy world of Hollywood, friendships are often as fleeting as a shooting star, but the bond between Sophia Loren and Cary Grant was a connection that defied the norms of Tinseltown. It was a friendship that was genuine, deep, and unbreakable, a relationship that transcended the superficiality of fame and fortune. The story of Sophia and Cary's friendship began on the set of Houseboat in 1958. Cary, the suave and sophisticated leading man, was instantly smitten with the young and vivacious Sophia. Their chemistry on screen was palpable, but it was their off-screen connection that truly set tongues wagging. Cary was enchanted by Sophia's charm, her wit, and her authenticity. He saw in her a kindred spirit, a woman who was grounded and real despite her meteoric rise to stardom. Sophia, in turn, was drawn to Cary's warmth, his intelligence, and his genuine interest in her well-being. Their friendship blossomed into a deep and meaningful connection, one that was built on mutual respect, trust, and affection. Cary became a mentor to Sophia, guiding her through the labyrinthine world of Hollywood, offering advice, support, and a shoulder to lean on. But their relationship was not without its share of drama. Cary's feelings for Sophia grew into something more profound, something that went beyond mere friendship. He proposed to Sophia, a gesture that was both romantic and complicated. Sophia, who was already involved with Carlo Ponti, was torn between her affection for Cary and her commitment to Carlo. In the end, Sophia chose Carlo, a decision that could have shattered her friendship with Cary, but their bond was stronger than any Hollywood script, and their friendship endured. Cary respected Sophia's decision, and their relationship continued to thrive, untainted by jealousy, resentment, or bitterness. Sophia and Cary's friendship was a rare gem in the often fickle world of Hollywood. It was a relationship that was devoid of pretense, ego, or ulterior motives. They remained friends until Cary's death in 1986, a friendship that was as enduring as their legendary careers. Their story is a reminder that true friendships can exist in the most unlikely of places, that connections can be forged in the midst of chaos, and that love, in all its forms, is a force that can transcend even the most challenging of circumstances. But wait, there's more to Sophia's story that's waiting to be told. Ready to delve into Sophia's impact on Italian cinema and discover how she became the queen of neorealism? The next chapter is a cinematic journey that will take you into the heart of Italian film, and it's a ride you won't want to miss. The queen of neorealism, Sophia's impact on Italian cinema. In the world of cinema, the term neorealism evokes images of gritty streets, raw emotions, and unfiltered glimpses into the lives of ordinary people.
It's a movement that revolutionized Italian cinema, and at the heart of this transformation was none other than Sophia Loren. Sophia's journey into the world of neorealism began with her roles in films like Two Women, 1960, where she portrayed characters that were real, relatable, and devoid of Hollywood glamour. Her performances were a departure from the stereotypical portrayals of women on screen, and they resonated with audiences who saw in her characters reflections of their own lives. In Two Women, Sophia played the role of a mother struggling to protect her daughter during World War II. Her performance was raw, powerful, and devoid of artifice. It was a portrayal that earned her the Academy Award for Best Actress, making her the first actor to win an Oscar for a non-English-speaking role. But Sophia's impact on neorealism went beyond accolades and awards. She became a symbol of a new kind of cinema, one that was unafraid to delve into the complexities of human emotions, societal issues, and the harsh realities of life. Sophia's roles in neorealist films were a far cry from the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. She portrayed women who were strong yet vulnerable, fierce yet compassionate, and real in every sense of the word. Her characters were not just figments of a filmmaker's imagination. They were living, breathing embodiments of the struggles, joys, and sorrows of everyday people. Her collaboration with renowned Italian directors like Vittorio De Sica further cemented her status as a force to be reckoned with in the world of neorealism. Together they created films that were poignant, thought-provoking, and reflective of the human condition. Sophia's impact on Italian cinema was profound and far-reaching. She helped redefine the way women were portrayed on screen, breaking away from stereotypes and embracing characters that were multifaceted and authentic.
Hollywood loves a rebel until she becomes too much to handle. For every leading lady who played by the rules, there were a few who tore up the script, set fire to the set, and dared anyone to stop them. From on-set tantrums to feuds that turned into full-blown wars, these women didn't just break the rules, they rewrote them in red lipstick and bad decisions. Welcome to Hollywood's Bad Girls Club. Miriam Hopkins. She was the kind of actress who could light up the screen, but she was also one of those people who could drive everyone around her absolutely insane. Now, don't get me wrong, she had talent, no doubt about that, but she also had a personality that made directors want to pull their hair out and co-stars pray for patience. When she took on roles, she did more than just acting. She dominated. The problem was, she was also a dominating person, even off-screen. Whenever she didn't get her way, she would pull your ear out with whining and complaining. She would tell everyone within a 10-mile radius, and if you had the misfortune of crossing her path and she had a problem with you, she'd plant seeds of hatred in everyone around you. All these are not just cheap talk. Her feud with Bette Davis was legendary. These two couldn't stand each other, and when they were forced to work together, it was like putting a lit match next to a gas tank. Things really exploded when they co-starred in The Old Maid in 1939. Problem was, both of them wanted to be the center of attraction on set, and Miriam was used to being the queen bee. Bette Davis, on the other hand, was coming in hot, and neither of them was about to back down. There were constant power struggles. Who got the better camera angles? Who got the most screen time? Who got to steal the spotlight? They were practically keeping score. At one point, Miriam was so fed up with Bette stealing her thunder that she would deliberately drag out her own scenes, forcing Bette to just stand there and wait. And if that wasn't petty enough, rumor has it that she took pleasure in making Bette redo her scenes as many times as possible just to mess with her. But none of these compares to how paranoid she was about being upstaged. If she thought another actress was stealing attention, she'd go out of her way to make sure the focus stayed on her. There's even a story that she used to tamper with costumes and props to throw off her co-stars. And don't even get me started on her competitive streak when it came to landing roles. She and Bette Davis had another major falling out when Bette got the part of Jezebel in 1938, a role that Miriam really wanted. Instead of congratulating her, Miriam acted like Bette had personally stolen it from her, and she never let it go. At the end of the day, she made Hollywood exciting, but she also made it exhausting. If she were around today, she'd probably be trending every other week for behind-the-scenes drama. But hey, at least she kept things interesting, right? Constance Bennett. Bennett was a full-blown diva, and she knew it. She walked onto every set like she owned the place, and honestly, sometimes she kind of did. For context, she came from Hollywood royalty. Her father was stage and film actor Richard Bennett, so she carried herself like she was above the usual rules of show business. And if someone tried to treat her like an ordinary actress, oh, they were in for a rude awakening. To be sure, directors, co-stars, producers, she clashed with all of them. She had a sharp tongue and an even sharper attitude, and she wasn't afraid to put people in their place if they didn't meet her expectations. There are stories of her walking off set mid-scene just because she didn't like how things were going. If a director dared to give her a note she didn't agree with, she'd argue right there on set, holding up production just to prove she wasn't one to be bossed around. In a nutshell, she also had standards. And by that, I mean she demanded the absolute best treatment at all times. She expected top billing, the best costumes, the best lighting, and her own personal space on set that no one else was allowed to invade. If her name wasn't in the biggest font on a movie poster, she'd throw a fit. And heaven help anyone who tried to make her do something she considered beneath her status. But how did this look like for everyone else around her? God question. One of her most infamous feuds was with Warner Brothers head Jack Warner. She signed a contract with the studio, but quickly decided she hated the way they operated. So what did she do? She found every loophole possible to make life miserable for them. She refused roles, showed up late, and made outrageous demands just to prove she wasn't going to play by their rules. Eventually, they gave up and let her go. That was Constance in a nutshell. Her way or no way at all. She might have been a nightmare to work with, but she made damn sure no one ever forgot her. Susan Hayward. This actress came up in Hollywood when the studios expected actresses to be sweet, submissive, and easy to control. But when it came to Susan, they were barking off the wrong tree. She had zero interest in playing nice. She had a reputation for being fiery, temperamental, and absolutely unwilling to take nonsense from anyone, whether it was a director, a co-star, or a producer trying to push her around. She fought tooth and nail for every role she got, and once she had it, she was all in, which sometimes made her a nightmare to work with. Directors would try to rein her in, but that made it 10 times worse. She had no patience for being micromanaged. If she didn't like how a scene was going, she'd let everyone know, and if she thought a director was incompetent, she wasn't shy about calling them out in front of the whole crew. It was bold, it was risky, but it was very Susan. As a matter of fact, one of her most famous clashes happened on the set of I'll Cry Tomorrow in 1955, where she played real-life alcoholic singer Lillian Roth. It was a brutal role, emotionally and physically draining, and she threw herself into it to the point of exhaustion. But on the bright side, Susan wasn't the type to admit weakness. That's good, right? Well, not exactly, because instead of taking a break, she just got angrier and more irritable. She lashed out at the director, complained about the grueling shooting schedule, and reportedly stormed off set more than once. But guess what? She still delivered an incredible performance that earned her an Oscar nomination. That was the thing about Susan. No matter how difficult she was, she always delivered. Marie Prevost. When it came to silent films, Marie Prevost was the it girl. Young, gorgeous, and oozing charisma. She had that effortless charm that made audiences fall in love with her, and for a while she was riding high. But Hollywood is brutal, and when the industry shifted to talkies, Marie's career started slipping. And let's just say she didn't handle it well. At her peak, she was working with some of the biggest directors in town, but even then, she had a bit of a reputation for being headstrong and unpredictable. She liked to party. She had a sharp tongue, and she didn't always play by the rules. But as her career started to decline, that rebellious streak turned into something darker. She became unmanageable, showing up late, arguing with directors, and sometimes just not showing up at all. As you might imagine, the studios had no patience for that kind of behavior, especially from an actress they didn't see as a box office draw anymore. So they pushed back, and it made her 10 times more difficult. The real turning point came when she started drinking heavily. It started out as just a little indulgence here and there, but it later became full-on self-destruction. She was drowning in booze, using it to numb the pain of her fading career. And it didn't take long before the studios washed their hands of her completely. She went from leading lady to barely scraping by, picking up whatever small roles she could just to survive. By the time the 1930s rolled around, Marie was a shell of the star she used to be. She was broke, drinking herself into oblivion, and completely alienated from the industry that once adored her. And then, in one of Hollywood's saddest and most infamous stories, she passed away alone in her tiny apartment in 1937. She had practically wasted away, malnourished and forgotten. And the most haunting part? Her dog had been trapped in the apartment with her for days, desperately trying to wake her up. When the authorities finally found her, the poor dog had been nibbling at her body just to survive. It's the kind of tragic, grim ending that old Hollywood was notorious for. Lena Basquette. There's no easy way to say it. Lena Basquette was the kind of woman who made old Hollywood executives sweat. She was more than a handful to deal with. She was a full-blown firecracker who refused to play by the rules. Studios liked their leading ladies to be glamorous, obedient, and scandal-free, but that wasn't Lena. She was basically the opposite of those things. She had a sharp tongue, a wild streak, and a habit of getting involved with the wrong men, and Hollywood just didn't know what to do with her. She started in silent films and was absolutely stunning on screen. But behind the scenes, she was more interested in stirring up drama than taking direction. She had affairs with powerful men, big-shot producers, directors, even tycoons, and let's just say it didn't always end well. One of these her high-profile relationships was with Sam Warner, one of the Warner Brothers founders. She married him, which should have secured her a permanent spot in Hollywood royalty, but when he died young, she was left fighting with his family over his fortune. And the Warner family? They hated her. They saw her as nothing more than a gold digger and basically blacklisted her from the industry. Not that Lena ever needed help getting into trouble. She was trouble herself. So imagine how people felt when they realized she had a connection to Adolf Hitler. No joke. She claimed he was a huge fan of hers and even invited her to Germany. According to Lena, he wanted to make her a personal guest of the Third Reich. She turned him down, of course, but the whole thing just added to her already chaotic reputation. Pola Negri. Every move she made, every word she spoke, every tear she cried, and there were a lot of those, was dialed up to 100. She came from European silent cinema, where over-the-top drama was the way to go, and she brought that same energy into real life. How did the studios take it? Well, they all loved her at first, until they realized she was just as dramatic off-screen as she was on it. She threw tantrums, made ridiculous demands, and always made sure the spotlight was on her. She even went as far as to fake an illness just to get sympathy. And not just a little cold or a headache. No, she went full soap opera with it. She'd suddenly become too weak to work, collapsing into the arms of a conveniently placed assistant, only to miraculously recover the moment she got her way. And if someone dared to call her out on it, well, let's just say they weren't going to have a fun day on set. I mean, even her love life was dramatic. When she got involved with Rudolph Valentino, the ultimate heartthrob of silent cinema, it was epic while it lasted, but when he passed suddenly in 1926, Pola saw an opportunity for the performance of a lifetime. She showed up at his funeral in full mourning attire, weeping dramatically, collapsing against his coffin, basically turning the whole thing into her own personal tragedy. People were torn between feeling bad for her and wondering if she was just putting on a show. Spoiler, she definitely was. Betty Hutton. High energy, loud, and completely unstoppable, Betty Hutton was like a human tornado. If you've ever seen her in Annie Get Your Gun in 1950, you know exactly what I mean. She was all wide eyes, big expressions, and go energy. That worked great on film, but behind the scenes, it made her a nightmare to work with. Directors were constantly at their wits' end with her. She wasn't just enthusiastic, she was exhausting. She had a habit of outperforming everyone around her, which didn't sit well with co-stars who weren't keen on being upstaged. She would over-rehearse scenes to the point of driving everyone crazy, sometimes working herself into a frenzy so intense that she'd actually collapse from exhaustion. And if she didn't like the way something was going, she made sure people knew about it. In fact, one of her biggest blow-ups was with director Cecil B. DeMille on the set of The Greatest Show on Earth in 1952. Now, unlike most other directors, DeMille was not the kind of guy you argued with. He was old-school Hollywood royalty, and his word was law. But Betty didn't care. She was constantly butting heads with him, questioning his choices, and basically running around like a one-woman circus. DeMille reportedly got so fed up that he swore he'd never work with her again. And guess what? He didn't. In the end, it's safe to say Betty's biggest enemy, the people around her. It was herself. She had this deep-seated insecurity that made her need constant reassurance. If she wasn't the center of attention, she'd spiral. That made her clingy with directors, needy with co-stars, and hell for producers who had to deal with her emotional roller coasters. There were stories about her breaking down in tears if she thought someone else was getting more praise than her, and she'd swing from manic excitement to meltdown mode in record time. Eventually, Hollywood just couldn't keep up with her. By the late 1950s, her career was in free fall. The industry that once praised her energy now found her too much to handle, and the offers dried up. Winifred Westover. She was young, beautiful, and talented, but she had one big problem. She absolutely refused to play by Hollywood's rules. If something wasn't going her way, she didn't sulk quietly or try to negotiate. She fought. And in an industry run by men who expected women to be obedient and grateful, that kind of attitude didn't make her many friends. Sadly, her claim to fame was her train wreck of a marriage to silent film legend William S. Hart. Now, Hart was the big deal of Western films. This guy practically invented the cowboy hero. He was rugged, serious, and about 30 years older than Winifred. When they got married in 1921, it should have been a Hollywood fairy tale. Instead, it turned into a messy disaster. So what was the issue? Well, Winifred hated being stuck in Hart's shadow. She wanted a career of her own, but he wanted a traditional wife, and she was not about that life. Recipe for disaster. The marriage lasted less than a year before completely imploding, and their divorce battle was ugly. There were accusations, bitterness, and a whole lot of drama that played out in public. Hart, who had spent his whole career playing tough, honorable cowboys, was humiliated. And Winifred? Well, Hollywood started seeing her as too much trouble. But that wasn't her only issue. Even before her marriage, she had a reputation for being difficult. She had a fiery temper and absolutely refused to take orders from producers or directors. If she didn't like a script, she'd argue about it. If a scene didn't feel right to her, she'd fight to change it. And if someone tried to push her into something she didn't want to do, good luck, because she'd rather walk off set than back down. Even after her divorce, she tried making a comeback, but Hollywood had moved on. The industry had no patience for actresses who were seen as troublemakers, and Winifred had already burned too many bridges. By the late 1920s, she was done. She faded out of the spotlight, leaving behind a reputation as one of silent film's most stubborn, fiery, and impossible to control actresses. Joan Marsh. Joan Marsh was one of those classic Hollywood cases where a child star grows up and refuses to take orders from anyone. She started in the silent film era as an adorable, blonde-haired little darling playing the wide-eyed innocent in early pictures. But by the time she transitioned into more mature roles, that sweet little girl image was long gone. Joan had an attitude, and she wasn't afraid to let everyone know it. You see, the thing about Joan was that she genuinely had talent. She was beautiful, she had comedic timing, and she could act when she wanted to. But working with her, that was a different story. She had a reputation for being incredibly demanding, often showing up to set with a list of complaints before the cameras even started rolling. She would argue with directors over the smallest details, insisting that she knew better than they did. And if she wasn't feeling a particular scene or line, forget it. She'd dig her heels in and refuse to do it until it was rewritten to her liking. Even her co-stars weren't exactly big fans of hers either. Joan had a habit of stealing the spotlight, both on and off screen. She'd upstage other actresses in scenes, sometimes by subtly overacting or shifting her position so the camera favored her instead. If a director tried to correct her, she'd push back, sometimes storming off set or causing delays. One of her biggest issues was that she seemed to think she was a much bigger star than she actually was. She was never a top-tier actress like Bette Davis or Joan Crawford, but you wouldn't know that from the way she carried herself. She expected A-list treatment in a B-list career, and that attitude rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. So, by the late 1930s, Hollywood got tired of her antics. The roles started drying up, and Joan eventually faded from the industry, making her last film in the 1940s before disappearing into a quiet post-Hollywood life. She may not have left behind an Oscar-winning legacy, but in terms of being difficult, she absolutely earned her spot in Hollywood's Bad Girls Club. Barbara Payton. Payton had all the makings of a star, and for a while, she was one. She had the looks, the confidence, and that undeniable screen presence that made casting directors sit up and take notice. But there was one problem. Barbara was wild, and not in the charming, rebellious way that some stars could get away with. No, she was full throttle, no brakes, set her own career on fire wild. In essence, her biggest enemy was herself. At first, Hollywood ate her up. She was stunning, blonde, curvy, with a sultry attitude that made her impossible to ignore. She started landing roles in films like Kiss Tomorrow Goodbye in 1950 with James Cagney, and people started calling her the next big thing. But behind the scenes, things were already unraveling. Barbara partied hard. She was drinking heavily, showing up to sets late or sometimes not at all, and making a lot of bad decisions. And then came the relationships. Oh boy, Barbara wasn't just dating famous men, she was destroying them. Her most infamous love triangle? That would be her disastrous affair with actors Franchot Tone and Tom Neal. Now, Tone was a classy, sophisticated actor, old Hollywood royalty. Tom Neal, on the other hand, was a rough-around-the-edges B-movie tough guy. Barbara bounced between the two like a human wrecking ball. It all came to a head in 1951 when Neal brutally beat Tone so badly that he ended up in the hospital with a broken nose, a concussion, and brain damage. And where was Barbara during all of this? Taking Neal back. That scandal was Hollywood poison, and studios wanted nothing to do with her after that. After that, her career fell fast. She was too much of a liability. Too unpredictable, too much bad press, and way too much drama. The offers dried up, and Barbara turned to smaller and smaller roles before she eventually ended up completely out of the industry. But instead of stepping away gracefully, she spiraled hard. The drinking got worse, the bad relationships kept coming, and before long she was completely broke, turning to selling her body just to survive. What if I told you that one of television's most beloved sweethearts vanished without a trace? That the woman who once lit up millions of living rooms with a smile quietly stepped away from the spotlight, only to leave behind a trail of eerie silence, strange coincidences, and questions that still haven't been answered? This isn't just another forgotten celebrity story. This is about Laurie Saunders, the bright-eyed star of Petticoat Junction, who seemed to have it all, only to disappear so suddenly. It was like she'd never existed at all. No farewell tour, no final interview, just gone. The more you dig, the more you realize her end wasn't just quiet, it was chilling. And once you hear the facts, you'll never see Laurie Saunders the same way again. A Star is Born. Laurie Saunders wasn't always Laurie Saunders. She was actually born Linda Marie Hines on October 4th, 1941 in Kansas City, Missouri. Pretty regular beginning, nothing flashy, no Hollywood connections, no silver spoon. Just a Midwestern girl who eventually made it big in a way few small-town kids ever do. Her family moved to Los Angeles when she was still young, which is where everything really started to shift for her. Now, Laurie was always into the arts. She loved performing, singing, dancing, acting, the whole deal. You could say she had that classic, born for the stage kind of vibe. She studied acting under the legendary Jeff Corey, a man who trained tons of famous faces, and that really set the foundation for her career. She wasn't just pretty, she was putting in the work early on, sharpening her skills in an industry that chews people up and spits them out if they're not ready. She started doing small stuff, little TV gigs, background parts, commercials, that kind of thing. Nothing major at first, but she was persistent. And then came the role that would change everything. Bobby Joe Bradley on Petticoat Junction. That's when she stopped being Linda Hines and became Laurie Saunders, literally. She changed her name around this time to stand out more in the industry, and it worked. The audience loved her. She stepped into the role in 1965, taking over from another actress, and totally made it her own. That role made her a household name. Overnight, she was this bright, charming face on American TV, playing the sweet, bookish daughter in a wholesome, light-hearted show that people just couldn't get enough of. And while the character might have seemed simple, Laurie had a way of giving Bobby Jo depth and warmth. That was her breakout moment, no question about it. From there, the doors of Hollywood cracked open just wide enough to let her in. The glory days. Getting the role of Bobby Jo Bradley wasn't just luck for Laurie Saunders, it was timing, preparation, and the ability to step into some pretty big shoes. You see, Petticoat Junction had already been on the air for a couple of seasons when the original Bobby Jo, played by Pat Woodell, left the show. That's when Laurie came in. She auditioned and nailed it. The producers needed someone who could bring a fresh energy to the character but still keep the vibe of the show intact, and Laurie had that charm, this mix of sweet and spirited that just clicked. Her version of Bobby Jo was less of the quiet bookworm and more bubbly and full of life, and fans embraced her pretty much immediately, which is no small feat when you're replacing someone beloved. Now, the chemistry between the three actresses who played the Bradley sisters, Laurie Saunders, Meredith McRae, who played Billy Jo, and Linda Kay Henning as Betty Jo, was part of what made the show so addictive. On screen, they felt like real sisters, teasing each other, supporting each other, getting into innocent mischief around the shady rest hotel. But what made it even better was that they genuinely got along off-screen, too. There was a real sense of camaraderie behind the scenes, which helped make their performances feel warm and believable. It wasn't all drama and ego like a lot of Hollywood sets, at least not between the girls. They had fun, and that fun translated into the final product. Petticoat Junction was a hit. It was part of that rural comedy wave alongside Green Acres and the Beverly Hillbillies, and people loved it. Laurie became a familiar face in millions of homes across America. She wasn't just playing a role, she became Bobby Jo in the eyes of the public. That's a blessing and a curse. The fame was huge. It brought her recognition, fan mail, and the kind of celebrity status that was hard to ignore. But it also boxed her in. Once the show ended, Hollywood couldn't seem to see her as anything but Bobby Jo. That kind of typecasting was brutal, especially in an industry that already had limited roles for women at the time. Behind the curtains. Behind the scenes, Laurie Saunders lived a life that was a lot quieter than the one most fans imagined. While she played bubbly, charming characters on screen, her personal life was grounded and, honestly, kind of refreshingly normal compared to most Hollywood stories. She married Bernard Sandler, a talent agent, and they stayed together for decades. No scandals, no dramatic tabloid headlines, just a stable marriage in an industry where that's practically unheard of. They also had 2 kids together and raised them outside the public eye, which Laurie seemed to prefer. She wasn't trying to turn her family into some Hollywood dynasty, she just wanted a real life, something solid and away from all the flashing lights. Even during the height of her fame, Laurie didn't come across as someone obsessed with being a celebrity. Sure, she enjoyed the success, the fan mail, the red carpet moments, but she was never one to chase controversy or stir up attention just to stay relevant. That didn't mean she was free from pressure, though. Being on a popular show like Petticoat Junction came with its own kind of stress. There were always expectations to stay young, stay cheerful, stay marketable. That's tough for anyone, but especially for women in Hollywood at the time. You were either the fresh-faced girl next door or yesterday's news, there wasn't much in between. And Laurie fit so perfectly into that sweet, wholesome role that it became hard for casting directors to imagine her as anything else. There were always little rumors floating around, mostly harmless stuff about her possibly retiring early or stepping back because she didn't want to play the game anymore. And honestly, there might be some truth to that. After Petticoat Junction wrapped up and the rural TV trend started fading, her roles got fewer and farther between. She did a few guest spots here and there, like in The Beverly Hillbillies, and movies like Bloodbath and A Day at the White House, but she never had another breakout moment. Some people thought she was pushed out by Hollywood's shifting tastes, while others believed she just decided she was done with it. The reality? It was probably somewhere in the middle. Lori never made a dramatic exit. She didn't hold a press conference or write a tell-all book. She just quietly stepped back and started focusing on things that made her happy, like art, photography, and working with animals. She wasn't bitter or angry. She didn't try to claw her way back into the spotlight. It was like she had made peace with it all. She'd had her moment, she'd made her mark, and that was enough. In a business built on constant reinvention and attention-seeking, that kind of graceful exit is rare and, honestly, kind of admirable. Her swing at music. Back in the 1960s, Lori Saunders took a swing at something beyond the screen, music. It wasn't a total left turn, considering the wholesome musical vibes of Petticoat Junction, but it definitely showed another side of her. She released a single titled Lonely Christmas, a soft, melancholic holiday tune that didn't exactly shoot to the top of the charts, but it had that earnest charm fans expected from her. The B-side, Out of Your Mind, was a bit edgier, more of a garage rock gem than a syrupy TV tie-in. It didn't get much attention at the time, but years later, that very song ended up on the cult compilation Girls in the Garage Volume 2, a collection of obscure 60s tracks by female artists that music lovers now treat like buried treasure. Suddenly, decades later, people were rediscovering Lori Saunders not just as a TV actress, but as a contributor to that gritty, underrated world of vintage girl rock. And it wasn't just a solo venture. Lori teamed up with her Petticoat Junction co-stars, Linda Kay Henning and Meredith McRae, and together they formed a short-lived singing group called The Girls from Petticoat Junction. It was a classic 1960s marketing move. Take three popular TV actresses, put them in matching outfits, and let them sing catchy tunes. But it worked, at least for the fans. They released a few singles, including If You Could Only Be Me in 1968 and 30 Days Hath September. Both songs were sweet, light, and very much of their time, bubblegum pop meets country twang, with a touch of innocence and girl-next-door appeal. Reception-wise, the music didn't exactly cause a national frenzy, but among Petticoat Junction fans, it was a hit. Kids who watched the show were thrilled to hear Bobby Joe, Betty Joe, and Billy Joe sing together in real life. For them, it was like the show had jumped off the screen and into the record player. The songs weren't revolutionary, but they were catchy and comforting, the kind of tunes you'd expect to hear in a 1960s diner or on an AM radio during a lazy afternoon. Now, those tracks have a second life. The Girls from Petticoat Junction 60s Sounds compilation brought all their recordings together, and nostalgia collectors have embraced it. It's not just fans of the show who care anymore. Vintage music lovers, vinyl collectors, and garage rock enthusiasts have started paying attention. There's this almost retroactive respect now, like people realizing, hey, this wasn't just a cute gimmick, these women were actually putting out solid music for their time. Lori might have never been a chart-topping singer, but that little pocket of her career, those recordings with her co-stars, showed another layer of her talent. And now, oddly enough, that long-forgotten music is part of how she's being remembered. It's kind of poetic, really. Decades after she faded from the spotlight, her voice is still echoing, on old records, in compilation albums, and through speakers of people who never even saw Petticoat Junction in its original run. It's one of those strange little legacies that time quietly preserves. The subtle spotlight exit. Lori Saunders' exit from Hollywood wasn't just quiet, it was practically ghost-like. One moment, she was a familiar face on TV reruns, smiling as Bobby Joe Bradley, and the next, it was like she'd vanished. No farewell tour, no final movie or emotional goodbye interview. She didn't try to squeeze out every last drop of fame like so many others from her era. She just stopped. The strangest part was that there was no big explanation. Nothing official ever came out to say, This is why Laurie Saunders left the business. It was as if the industry moved on without asking questions. And so did she. That abruptness is what makes it feel unsettling. Here was someone who had been in people's homes week after week, who still had that youthful glow and charisma even in her later appearances, and then she was gone. No dramatic scandal, no tragic downfall, just a full stop. Fans who remembered her from Petticoat Junction or even her lesser-known film roles started noticing something was off. She didn't pop up at nostalgic reunion specials. She didn't do the fan conventions. She wasn't on talk shows reflecting on the golden days. And for someone who had such a gentle public image, her silence became louder over time. It made people wonder, was something going on behind the scenes? Did she get burned out? Pushed out? Or did she see something in Hollywood that made her want to disappear? Now, while Laurie never outright slammed the industry, there were whispers in interviews and reports over the years that she wasn't all that enchanted with the way things worked. She once mentioned how limiting the roles were and how quickly Hollywood forgets women once they're past their prime. There was no big takedown, no names dropped, but you could feel the disappointment underneath her words, like someone who had seen enough to know she didn't want to stick around and play the game anymore. Then came the more curious shifts. People who did catch glimpses of her later on said she looked different, thinner, more fragile, almost like the energy had been drained out of her. Others said she'd become more private, almost reclusive, preferring to spend time with animals rather than people. Some former co-stars tried reaching out over the years but couldn't get through. A few even said they hadn't heard from her in decades. It wasn't just retirement, it was like she'd erased herself from Hollywood altogether. And maybe that was her way of taking control. Maybe Laurie saw how brutal the industry could be, how it lifted you up only to toss you aside once you didn't fit the mold anymore, and she wanted nothing to do with that cycle. So, instead of clinging to the spotlight, she let it go before it could chew her up and spit her out. Still, there's something haunting about it all. The way she slipped into silence without ever really telling her side of the story. The sudden shift in presence and appearance. The mystery of someone who once brought so much warmth into people's homes and then quietly walked away like none of it ever happened. It makes you wonder what really goes on behind the curtain, what the camera doesn't show, and who people become once the fame fades. Chilling theories about her exit. The final years of Laurie Saunders' life are where things get a little eerie, unsettling even. Not in a loud or scandalous way, but in that slow, quiet kind of disappearance that creeps up on you when no one's really paying attention. Although it was abrupt and people began to ask questions, they soon began to make up their own theories, which spread like wildfire. After decades of near-total silence, fans began asking, whatever happened to Bobby Joe? Where did she go? Was she okay? But there were never any clear answers, just shadows and fragments. Laurie didn't have a big public decline. There was no TMZ footage of her being wheeled out of a hospital, no tragic tell-all interview, no paparazzi catching her in a moment of desperation. In fact, part of what made her final years so strange is how little we know. The physical and emotional details are hazy at best. There were whispers, of course, rumors that she'd lost a lot of weight, that her energy was gone, that she looked almost unrecognizable in the few rare sightings that made it to public eyes. But nothing confirmed. Nothing concrete. Friends, what few remained in contact, have said in passing that Laurie became more withdrawn as time went on. Some said she didn't return calls. Others admitted they hadn't seen her since the early 2000s. She reportedly spent most of her later life in a quiet, secluded home, surrounded by animals and artwork, far away from the cameras and lights that once defined her world. There were no public breakdowns, but there also wasn't much connection, just a slow, isolating fade. It's unclear if she struggled with any major illness, but people have speculated. The way she disappeared so completely, no interviews, no appearances, no social media, suggests either deep emotional burnout or something heavier like depression or cognitive decline. Again, no family member ever spoke publicly about it. If she was sick, it was kept tightly under wraps. If she was lonely, No one knew just how badly. That silence became its own kind of mystery. Some say she was forgotten by Hollywood. Others believe she wanted to be. But what really chills people is that Lori seemed to vanish right when nostalgia for the golden TV era was booming. Her co-stars were doing interviews, reunions, fan conventions. Even actors with minor roles from that time found new attention and appreciation. Lori, though, stayed hidden. She didn't even show up for retrospectives of Petticoat Junction. Not a quote, not a cameo, nothing. It's like she erased herself from the story entirely. However, fans did receive one clue about what happened to Lori, and it's more concerning than you think. One of the last known photos of Lori surfaced on a fan forum, a grainy shot taken at a grocery store years after anyone had seen her. The woman in the photo was frail, quiet, with big sunglasses and a blank stare. The person who took it said they recognized her by chance, couldn't believe their eyes, and when they said her name aloud, she looked up just long enough to nod, then walked away without a word. There's something deeply symbolic about that. A star who lit up the screen with warmth and sparkle, reduced in the end to a nameless face in a supermarket aisle, fading out of frame like a final scene no one remembered to shoot. No big farewell, no final curtain call, just stillness. Whether Lori was running from something or simply choosing peace, we may never fully know. But there's a skin-crawling quiet to her ending. A Hollywood starlet who didn't crash and burn, but slowly dissolved into the background, leaving behind questions, memories, and a strange silence that still hasn't been broken. The memory of an icon. Even though Lori Saunders disappeared from public view, her memory didn't vanish completely. Petticoat Junction wouldn't let that happen. The show still runs in reruns, tucked into the corners of nostalgia channels and late-night schedules, reminding people of a simpler, sunnier era. And every time an episode airs, Lori's wide-eyed charm and gentle screen presence come back to life like a time capsule that refuses to close. She might not have become a massive household name like some of her contemporaries, but within the world of classic TV, she's iconic. Fans who grew up watching her as Bobby Joe never stopped loving her. They share old clips online, trade stories in forums, and post rare magazine covers from the 60s like precious relics. She's frozen in that golden time forever, young, graceful, smiling, and for a lot of people, that's how they choose to remember her. Not as the woman who vanished from the spotlight, but as the sweet middle Bradley sister who made people laugh and feel comforted. But the deeper you think about it, the more Lori's story starts to say something much bigger, something uncomfortable. Her vanishing act wasn't just about one person's private decision. It taps into a recurring theme in Hollywood, especially for women. You can be beloved, talented, even successful, and still be tossed aside the moment your image no longer fits the fantasy. Lori was typecast early, boxed into the role of the wholesome beauty, and when she tried to branch out, the doors weren't exactly open. Hollywood didn't know what to do with her beyond pretty and sweet, and when she got older, it seemed like the industry just shrugged and moved on. That kind of erasure isn't new. It happens all the time, especially to actresses from her generation. They light up the screen for a while, draw millions of fans, then quietly get written out of the story once they age or stop playing the game. And most of the time, no one asks where they went. That's what makes Lori's story feel so haunting. It's not just about her. It's about all the others like her who vanish just as quietly. And maybe that's the final, chilling question her story leaves behind. What happens to the stars when the lights go out? Not just in a poetic sense, but literally when the scripts stop coming, the calls dry up, and the cameras stop rolling. Where do they go? Who remembers them? Does anyone reach out? Or do they fade into the silence, hoping someone might notice they're gone? Lori Saunders is still remembered, but in that eerie, bittersweet way where her presence feels more like a ghost from TV's past than a real person walking among us. She's there in reruns, frozen in time, smiling through a black and white screen, but behind that smile, there's a quiet mystery that never quite gets answered. And here's the thing, what the public saw and who Lori really was weren't exactly the same. On camera, She was this cheerful, radiant girl next door type. But in real life, she was more introspective. She loved painting, photography, animals, stuff that had nothing to do with TV. She wasn't chasing the spotlight 24/7. In fact, once the show ended and the roles started drying up, she didn't seem to fight too hard to stay in Hollywood's good graces. She didn't cause scenes or try to reinvent herself in a tabloid-worthy way. She just quietly faded out, which kind of added to the mystery later on. That duality, being adored by the public but misunderstood or overlooked by the industry, was a defining part of her story. Hollywood made her famous, but it never really let her grow. Farrah Fawcett was the most famous woman in America. She had the looks, the fame, and the success, until Hollywood turned its back on her. And when she needed the world most, it was too busy watching someone else. Small-town Texas to Hollywood dreams. Farrah Fawcett was born on February 2, 1947, in Corpus Christi, Texas. Even as a child, people took notice. Classmates, teachers, even strangers. She wasn't just beautiful, she had an effortless charisma that made her stand out. At W.B. Ray High School, she was voted Most Beautiful all 4 years, a school record. But beauty wasn't her focus. She had a sharp mind and planned to study microbiology at the University of Texas at Austin. That plan didn't last long. A photographer saw her yearbook picture and sent it to a Hollywood agent. Within weeks, she was flooded with modeling offers. Her parents were hesitant. Hollywood was unpredictable and they wanted stability for their daughter. But Farrah had options. She continued her studies, balancing classes with commercial shoots for beauty products and fashion campaigns. By 1968, she made the leap. She left Texas for Los Angeles with the goal of becoming an actress. Success didn't come overnight. She appeared in shampoo commercials, did minor TV guest spots, and took on small modeling gigs. Her first major contract was with Screen Gems, the studio behind Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie. It was a foot in the door, but big roles were still out of reach. Her first credited role came in 1969 on Mayberry RFD, followed by appearances on The Flying Nun and The Partridge Family. It wasn't glamorous, but it was work. She took whatever she could get, knowing all it took was one role to change everything. That role came in 1974 when she landed a recurring part on Harry O. She played Sue Ingram, the neighbor of the lead detective, for 8 episodes. The show got her noticed, but it wasn't enough to make her a household name. Then came The $6 Million Man. Cast as Steve Austin's love interest, she gained even more visibility. She also caught the attention of the show's star, Lee Majors. The two became inseparable, and by 1973, they were married. Majors was already an established TV star, and with his guidance, her career started moving faster. But no one, not even Farrah, was prepared for what came next. Becoming a superstar overnight. In 1976, Charlie's Angels premiered on ABC, and Farrah Fawcett became the most famous woman in America, practically overnight. The show was a phenomenon. Farrah, alongside Jaclyn Smith and Kate Jackson, played private detectives working for the unseen Charles Townsend. Her character, Jill Monroe, was the standout. Carefree, confident, and effortlessly cool, she wasn't just another TV character, she was a cultural icon. At the same time, her now famous red swimsuit poster hit stores. It sold 12 million copies, making it the most popular pinup of all time. Every teenage boy had it. Every woman wanted her hair. The Farrah flip became the most requested hairstyle in salons across the country. But behind the glamour, she was drowning in exhaustion. The TV schedule was brutal. 12 to 14-hour days, 6 days a week. On top of that, she had to do endless press tours, photo shoots, and public appearances. Hollywood loved her, but they also controlled her every move. Her marriage with Lee Majors suffered. He was still filming The $6 Million Man and expected her to be home by the time he finished work. She wasn't. By the end of the first season, she had a decision to make: continue on Charlie's Angels or leave at the peak of her success. She chose the latter. ABC wasn't happy. They sued her for breach of contract, demanding $7 million in damages. The case was messy, and ultimately she agreed to return for a few guest appearances to settle the lawsuit. The media called her crazy for leaving a hit show, but she didn't care. She wanted to prove she was more than just TV's golden girl. Hollywood, however, had other plans. Hollywood pushback and career struggles. Leaving Charlie's Angels should have been the moment Farrah Fawcett stepped into serious acting. Instead, it nearly ended her career. In 1978, she starred in Somebody Killed Her Husband, a suspense thriller meant to reinvent her image. The studio hyped it up as a Hitchcock-style mystery, but critics weren't buying it. Roger Ebert called it a slow-moving, uninspired mess. Audiences weren't interested either. The film bombed at the box office. It didn't just underperform, it humiliated her. Hollywood took it as proof she wasn't leading lady material. She was slapped with the dreaded TV actress label, a death sentence for credibility in film. Directors didn't see her as serious. Producers assumed she lacked depth. She was offered more fluff roles, light comedies, throwaway dramas, none of which aligned with what she wanted. Determined to shake the stigma, she tried again with Sunburn in 1979. It was a crime comedy pairing her with Charles Grodin. On paper, it looked promising. In reality, it was another misfire. Critics were unimpressed. Audiences barely noticed. Farrah's second attempt at big screen stardom fizzled out just as quickly as the first. By the early 80s, she was at a crossroads. The industry didn't respect her, and her career had lost momentum. But instead of accepting defeat, she took a risk no one saw coming. She pivoted to Broadway. In 1983, she took on the lead role in Extremities, a brutal, emotionally charged play about a woman fighting back against an attacker. It was the polar opposite of anything she'd done before, raw, violent, and deeply disturbing. Hollywood had never given her material like this, so she found it herself. The response? Explosive. Audiences were stunned. Critics finally saw her as a real actress. The New York Times praised her performance as harrowing and fearless. She earned standing ovations nightly. For the first time in her career, no one was talking about her hair, her looks, or her past as an angel. They were talking about her talent. Forgotten film career. Farrah Fawcett will always be remembered for Charlie's Angels, but many forget that she continued working well into the 90s and 2000s, taking on challenging roles that rarely got the recognition they deserved. After her Golden Globe nomination for Extremities in 1986, she was finally being taken seriously as an actress. She continued her streak of gritty, dramatic roles in TV movies, including Poor Little Rich Girl, The Barbara Hutton Story, 1987, Double Exposure, The Story of Margaret Bourke-White, 1989, and Small Sacrifices, 1989. The latter, based on true events, had her portraying Diane Downs, a mother convicted of shooting her own children. The role earned her another Golden Globe nomination and critical praise. In the 90s, she continued choosing projects that broke away from her sex symbol image. One of her most daring roles was in Robert Duvall's 1997 film The Apostle, where she played the estranged wife of a troubled preacher. The film was highly praised by critics, with many calling it one of the best performances of her career. But even with acclaim, it was clear that Hollywood wasn't offering her the same big-budget films that other actresses of her era were getting. Still, she worked steadily. Her 2000 TV movie, Jewel, was another strong performance, earning her a third Golden Globe nomination for her portrayal of a mother raising a child with Down syndrome. By the early 2000s, though, work slowed down. The industry was changing. Younger actresses dominated Hollywood, and casting directors were less interested in veteran stars. She made headlines more for her personal life than for her career. By the mid-2000s, offers dwindled. Her last major acting credit was a guest appearance on The Guardian in 2003, for which she received an Emmy nomination. A reminder that her talent never faded even if the industry moved on. Lee Majors, Ryan O'Neal, and a public scandal. Farrah Fawcett and Lee Majors looked like Hollywood's golden couple, but behind the scenes their marriage was unraveling. By the late 1970s, they were more like roommates than partners. Majors had traditional expectations. He wanted a wife waiting at home when he finished work. Farrah, however, was the biggest TV star in America, balancing grueling filming schedules, promotional tours, and endless magazine covers. The time apart was too much. By 1979, they had unofficially separated. The breakup wasn't ugly, but it was inevitable. Farrah had outgrown the role of the doting wife, and Majors couldn't accept her skyrocketing fame. Their divorce was finalized in 1982, but Farrah had already moved on to Ryan ONeal. Ryan ONeal and Farrah Fawcett's relationship was a Hollywood roller coaster, passionate, volatile, and endlessly complicated. They first got together in 1979, shortly after her split from Lee Majors. Ryan was already a major star, known for Love Story, 1970, and Barry Lyndon, 1975. Their chemistry was instant, but so was the drama. For years, they were one of Hollywood's most talked-about couples, but behind the scenes things weren't as glamorous. Their relationship was off and on for decades, marked by explosive fights, reconciliations, and long periods of separation. In 1997, they briefly split after Ryan admitted to cheating on her, but no matter how many times they walked away, they always seemed to find their way back. Friends described them as madly in love but constantly at war. ONeal later admitted, "Farrah and I fought like a couple of lions." And they did. Screaming matches, breakups that never lasted, and moments of bliss that never lasted either. When Farrah was diagnosed with cancer in 2006, Ryan became her primary caregiver. He stood by her side through grueling treatments, hospital visits, and painful setbacks. He later admitted, "I never left her side for 3 years." As her condition worsened, Ryan publicly announced his intention to marry her. He told the press, "I will ask her to marry me again. We will." But time was not on their side. By the time he formally proposed, Farrah was too weak to respond. He later reflected, "She never said yes, but she didn't say no." A mother's heartbreak and legal battles. She had faced career setbacks, industry battles, and a highly publicized love life, but nothing compared to the pain of watching her only son, Redmond ONeal, spiral out of control. Born on January 30th, 1985, Redmond was the child of two Hollywood icons, Farrah and Ryan ONeal. From the outside, he had every advantage: wealth, privilege, and parents who could open doors most could only dream of. But his reality was far from glamorous. Even as a child, those close to the family saw signs of trouble. He struggled with anger, impulse control, and drug experimentation at a young age. By his teenage years, his rap sheet was growing faster than his resume. Arrests for heroin possession, DUIs, probation violations, and drug-related incidents became routine. Each time, Farrah stepped in, paying for rehab, hiring the best lawyers, and pulling strings to keep him out of prison. But no amount of money or influence could stop the cycle. One of the most gut-wrenching moments came in 2008, when Farrah was fighting for her life. Redmond had been arrested again, this time for drug possession while on probation. She was too sick to appear in court, but she made sure her voice was heard. Through her representatives, she begged the judge for leniency, urging the court to give her son another chance. "The one thing I will never give up on is Redmond," she said. Redmond continued his run-ins with the law, bouncing in and out of rehab and prison. In 2018, he was arrested again, this time for attempted murder, armed robbery, and drug possession. Authorities described him as a danger to society. Cancer, media intrusion, and the final fight. In 2006, Farrah Fawcett was diagnosed with anal cancer, a rare and aggressive disease. She kept it private at first, confiding in close friends and family while undergoing radiation and chemotherapy at the renowned Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. She approached treatment with the same determination that had fueled her career, refusing to let the illness define her. By 2007, there was a glimmer of hope. Her doctors confirmed that the cancer was in remission. It seemed like she had won. But just months later, in May 2007, the disease returned. And this time, it was worse. The cancer had spread to her liver, making conventional treatment less effective. Farah wasn't willing to accept defeat. She sought experimental treatments in Germany, where doctors offered cutting-edge therapies not yet approved in the U.S. She endured painful stem cell treatments, embolization procedures, and alternative therapies, anything that might give her a chance. While she fought for her life, the media turned her illness into a spectacle. Paparazzi stalked her at hospitals, snapping photos of her in moments meant to be private. Then came the ultimate invasion. Her confidential medical records were leaked to the press. The public suddenly knew details about her treatment, prognosis, and declining health before she could even process them herself. Farah fought back. She sued the UCLA Medical Center, where an employee had illegally accessed her records. The hospital admitted to the breach and multiple staff members were fired, but the damage was already done. Despite the chaos, she decided to take control of her own story. She filmed her battle, raw and unfiltered, turning the footage into a documentary, Farah's Story. When it aired in May 2009, it was watched by 9 million people. Audiences saw her pain, her determination, and her refusal to let cancer steal her dignity. But by the time the special aired, her fight was nearly over. The world had just witnessed her final battle, and there was nothing left to do but wait. Her time was running out. The overlooked goodbye. On June 25, 2009, Farrah Fawcett lost her battle with cancer at 62 years old. It wasn't a sudden death. Her health had been deteriorating for months. Those closest to her knew the end was near. She spent her final days in a hospital in Santa Monica, surrounded by a few loved ones. Ryan ONeal never left her side. Her only son, Redmond ONeal, was in jail at the time. Despite his legal troubles, authorities granted him a brief visit to say goodbye. He arrived in an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs, escorted by law enforcement. It was a heartbreaking sight. His mother dying in a hospital bed, while he sat at her side, shackled. The moment was brief, but it was all he was allowed. The world had followed Farah's cancer battle through her self-produced documentary, Farah's Story, which aired just 6 weeks before her death. Nearly 9 million people tuned in to watch her unfiltered struggle. It was raw, emotional, and gave the public a first-hand look at her strength. Despite her vulnerability, she refused to let her illness define her. Early that morning, news of her passing spread. Hollywood prepared tributes, TV networks planned retrospectives, and fans mourned. But within hours, everything changed. That same afternoon, Michael Jackson was pronounced dead. The biggest pop star in the world, gone at 50 years old. The news cycle immediately shifted. Every major network, website, and newspaper dropped their planned Farrah tributes to cover Jackson's sudden death instead. His passing became a global media event. Farrah's death, once front-page news, was now an afterthought. By evening, she was barely a headline. For many, the timing felt unfair. Here was a woman who had spent years fighting for respect beyond her looks, and in her final moments, she was once again pushed to the background. Her funeral was small and private, held at the Cathedral of Our Lady of the Angels in Los Angeles. Ryan ONeal was there, devastated. Redmond was escorted in chains, allowed to attend under strict supervision. The media might have moved on quickly, but those who truly loved her never forgot. To them, she wasn't just a TV icon. She was a fighter, a mother, a woman who refused to be defined by anyone else's narrative. Her final battle wasn't just against cancer, it was against the way the world saw her. The fight over Farrah's fortune. Farrah Fawcett built a legacy worth $20 million, but when she passed in 2009, her estate didn't rest peacefully. Instead, it became a high-profile legal battle that exposed tensions between her closest relationships and revealed surprises about her final wishes. Her will was meticulously planned. She ensured her son, Redmond ONeal, received $4.5 million in a protected trust, guaranteeing financial support despite his legal troubles and struggles with addiction. Portions of her estate also went to charities, close friends, and her alma mater, the University of Texas at Austin. But one name was missing: Ryan ONeal. Despite being her on-again, off-again partner for 3 decades, Ryan wasn't listed as a beneficiary. He didn't receive money, property, or any official part of her estate. It was a shocking omission, fueling speculation about where their relationship truly stood at the time of her passing. The biggest dispute centered around a priceless Andy Warhol painting of Farrah, estimated to be worth millions. The University of Texas claimed she had left it to them as part of her final wishes. Ryan, however, disagreed completely. He insisted the painting was his, stating that Farrah had personally gifted it to him years earlier. The university wasn't backing down. They sued Ryan for possession, arguing that the painting was legally theirs and should remain in their collection. The legal battle dragged on for years, with Ryan fiercely contesting the claim. By 2013, a jury ruled in Ryan's favor, allowing him to keep the Warhol portrait. The decision was controversial, reigniting debates about whether Farrah had truly wanted him to have it, or if he had simply taken it after her death. Even though he won the case, the fight over the painting left unanswered questions. Had Farrah purposely left Ryan out of her will? Had their relationship deteriorated more than he publicly admitted? What should have been a straightforward estate settlement became yet another chapter of turmoil in her story. Even in death, Farrah Fawcett's legacy was not left in peace. If you worked in a Hollywood wardrobe department in the 1930s, there was one job nobody wanted: opening this girl's costume trunks. Why? Because inside were dance outfits soaked in sweat, sealed away for months, and according to this particular actress, washing them would ruin the magic. The habit begins. She wasn't just good, she was relentless. Every move had to be perfect. Every routine had to land flawlessly. And if she found something that worked, she held on to it for dear life. Her rise in the 1930s wasn't just about talent, it was about work ethic. Hollywood's top dancers trained hard, but Ginger Rogers trained harder. When she teamed up with Fred Astaire, she entered a new level of intensity. Astaire was famous for demanding perfection. He'd force retakes for hours until a routine felt effortless. Rogers didn't just keep up, she pushed herself even further. Dancing in heels? Standard. Rehearsing until her feet bled? No complaints. She wasn't going to be outperformed. But she started noticing something. When a dress fit just right, when the fabric moved the way she needed, everything clicked. The right costume could make or break a performance. That's when her superstition started. Most actors saw costumes as just clothes. Rogers saw them as lucky charms. If she nailed a performance in a particular dress, she refused to let it go. Washing it? Out of the question. She believed the sweat, the exhaustion, the energy of that perfect performance was locked into the fabric. At first, no one questioned it. Wardrobe teams set aside her favorite costumes, assuming it was just preference. But then, she stopped returning them. She'd store them unwashed, sealed away in personal trunks, convinced that keeping them untouched preserved the magic. The studio noticed. Costume designers started whispering about the growing collection. Some joked about it. Others weren't laughing. When a missing costume held up production, whispers turned into frustration. Hollywood was full of strange rituals. Actors carried lucky coins, avoided saying certain words on set, even refused to wear certain colors. But this was different. Rogers wasn't just holding onto a piece of clothing, she was building a collection of sweat-soaked memories. At first, people laughed it off. Then, they realized she wasn't joking. The first costume standoff. At first, Rogers' superstition was just an odd quirk, but as her collection of lucky costumes grew, it started causing real problems on set. The first major incident happened during the filming of Top Hat, 1935. Rogers had worn a specific blue feathered gown for a rehearsal and nailed every step. She insisted on wearing the same dress for the actual shoot, but there was one problem. The costume department needed to clean and adjust it before filming. Ginger Rogers refused. The wardrobe team pushed back. The dress had taken a beating during rehearsals, and the delicate feathers were falling apart. It needed repairs, but Rogers wasn't budging. She was convinced that even the slightest alteration could throw off her performance. Fred Astaire, known for his own perfectionism, wasn't happy. He had spent weeks rehearsing with her in that dress, and now they were on the verge of delaying production. The director, Mark Sandrich, had to step in. He tried reasoning with Rogers, explaining that the camera would pick up every stray feather and that the studio wouldn't allow her to wear something in less than perfect condition. Rogers didn't care. She argued that the weight, the feel, even the scent of the unwashed dress helped her stay in sync with the routine. She didn't trust a fresh version. If the studio wanted the best performance, she needed that exact dress, untouched. In the end, the studio made a deal. Minimal cleaning, no alterations, and no washing. The compromise kept the production moving, but it sent a message. Rogers' costume superstition wasn't just a harmless habit, she was willing to fight for it. The incident left wardrobe staff frustrated and baffled, but it wasn't the last time her obsession got in the way. Over time, it only got stranger. The dresses started disappearing entirely, locked away in her personal collection, and studio executives started taking notice. This wasn't just about luck anymore, it was about control. The vanishing costumes. At first, Ginger Rogers' costume habit seemed harmless. She liked to keep certain outfits unwashed, believing they held the energy of past performances. But as time passed, something strange started happening. Costumes went missing. By the late 1930s, wardrobe staff whispered about it. Costumes that should have been returned were nowhere to be found. At first, they assumed it was a mistake. Maybe a mix-up in storage. Maybe someone misplaced a gown. But then it kept happening, and one dress, in particular, set off alarm bells. It was during the filming of Carefree, 1938. Rogers wore a sleek silver dress for a dance sequence, a nightmare for the costume team. The fabric was delicate, wrinkled under the lights, and soaked up sweat during takes. After every scene, assistants had to steam it out fast before the next shot. The dress required constant care. Then, when filming wrapped, it vanished. Wardrobe staff searched everywhere. Dressing rooms, storage closets, even Rogers' trailer. Nothing. The head of wardrobe reportedly went to the producers. They weren't just worried about the dress. This wasn't the first time an outfit had disappeared. Rumors flew that Rogers had taken it, but no one wanted to confront her. She was one of Hollywood's biggest stars. Accusing her of stealing costumes, that could end a career. Instead, the producers allegedly met with her in private. What happened in that meeting? No one knows for sure, but the story goes that Rogers didn't deny anything. Instead, she explained that some costumes couldn't be replaced. They weren't just fabric. They held something more. Washing them, altering them, or letting someone else wear them would erase that magic. The studio, according to whispers, was not amused. Costumes were expensive, and missing wardrobe pieces meant extra costs and delays. Some claimed the studio began making duplicates of important costumes, expecting that Rogers might take the originals. But there was no stopping her. She wasn't just keeping costumes for luck anymore, she was collecting them. And soon, the growing pile of sweat-soaked, locked-away dresses would become a real problem. Wardrobe staff had no idea what was coming next, but they wouldn't like it. The trunks no one wanted to open. By the early 1940s, Rogers' superstition had gone beyond missing costumes. Now, the problem wasn't just that she kept them, it was how she stored them. Wardrobe staff dreaded one thing above all: opening her personal trunks. By this point, Rogers' collection of sweat-soaked, unwashed costumes had grown. She refused to let them be cleaned after major performances, convinced that doing so would wash away the energy that made them special. But instead of hanging them neatly in a wardrobe, she sealed them inside trunks and rarely touched them again. At first, people assumed she was just sentimental. Plenty of actors kept mementos from their biggest films. But then came the reports. When her trunks were finally opened, the smell was overwhelming. Wardrobe assistants whispered about the state of the gowns inside. Some were stiff with dried sweat. Others showed clear signs of deterioration from being locked away for too long. Silk and delicate fabrics didn't handle time, heat, or humidity well. One particularly talked about incident supposedly happened when Rogers requested an old costume for a publicity photo shoot. A wardrobe assistant was sent to retrieve it from one of her trunks. According to crew members who later shared the story, when the trunk was opened, the smell was so strong that the assistant gagged and had to step back. Rogers didn't seem to mind. To her, these dresses were sacred relics of past performances. It wasn't about how they looked or smelled. It was about what they represented. By now, her habit was no secret among Hollywood insiders. People working on set joked about the cursed costumes, but no one dared to challenge her directly. She was too powerful, too respected, and too set in her ways. Studios may have tried to work around her obsession, but Rogers wasn't changing. If anything, she was doubling down. If a dress had brought her success, it stayed with her forever, sealed in a trunk, untouched, unwashed. Some found it odd. Others found it disgusting. But no one could ignore it. And soon, the whispers would turn into full-blown complaints. The breaking point. By the mid-1940s, people in Hollywood knew about the trunks, the unwashed gowns, and the lingering smell that wardrobe staff dreaded. But for a long time, no one pushed back. She was a box office queen, and studios weren't about to challenge their golden star over a few missing dresses. Then came the day when they had no choice. According to whispers among costume staff, the breaking point happened during the production of one of her later musicals. A key costume, a gown Rogers had worn for weeks, vanished overnight. It wasn't on the racks in storage or in the cleaning department. It was gone. This time, the loss was a big deal. The costume wasn't just an extra. It was designed specifically for continuity. Without it, they couldn't reshoot a scene if needed. The studio panicked. Producers allegedly called an emergency meeting with the wardrobe team, demanding to know who had misplaced the dress. It didn't take long before someone quietly pointed toward Rogers. The problem? No one wanted to accuse her outright. Some claimed a studio executive was sent to ask her politely if she had kept the dress. If that meeting happened, there are no official records of it. But according to insiders, Rogers was completely unfazed. She didn't argue, she didn't deny it. She simply refused to hand it back. It was her dress now, and no one was going to convince her otherwise. The studio had two options. First, confront their biggest star and risk conflict. Second, silently remake the dress and pretend nothing happened. They chose the second option. The studio's silent strategy. By the late 1940s, Ginger Rogers was still a major star, but behind the scenes, studio executives were done playing along. They had given in too many times. Costumes kept disappearing, wardrobe staff were frustrated, and now, productions had to be planned around her superstition. But no one wanted to challenge her directly. Rogers was still one of Hollywood's most bankable actresses, and causing a feud with their leading lady wasn't an option. So, instead of confronting her, the studio adapted. According to rumors from insiders, the wardrobe department quietly started making duplicates of every costume Rogers wore. If she became attached to a dress, they let her take it, but they always had a backup ready. It wasn't just about superstition anymore. It was about control. Some costumers allegedly went as far as aging the duplicates, adding fake wear and slight fabric imperfections, so they'd look like the originals. If Rogers believed a dress had absorbed the energy of a perfect performance, the wardrobe team made sure she never noticed the swap. It wasn't a perfect system. There were still times when she demanded a specific dress and wouldn't accept anything else. In those cases, they had to stall production, delay scenes, or secretly remake the piece to match. It was exhausting, frustrating, and expensive. But it was better than arguing with Rogers. Some whispered that the executives even built costume replacement costs into film budgets, treating it like an unavoidable expense, just like renting a set or hiring extras. But no matter how much planning they did, one thing they couldn't control was time. Hollywood was changing. The 1950s were bringing new stars, new trends, and a new era of filmmaking. Rogers was still a household name, but her dominance was fading. And as her power in the industry weakened, so did the studio's patience. The turning tide. By the early 1950s, the Hollywood machine was shifting fast, and Ginger Rogers wasn't the unstoppable force she once was. New faces like Marilyn Monroe and Audrey Hepburn were stealing the spotlight, musicals were evolving, and Rogers, now in her 40s, wasn't the automatic first choice for lead roles anymore. And when her power faded, so did the studio's patience. For years, executives had quietly worked around her costume superstition, making duplicates, planning for missing wardrobe pieces, and keeping production moving without making a scene. But now, Rogers wasn't the studio's top priority anymore. And suddenly, the rules started changing. Her first real wake-up call reportedly came when she wrapped a film and tried to keep a costume, only to be told no. That had never happened before. Some crew members later claimed that Rogers didn't take it well. She had spent decades getting her way, and now the studio was treating her like any other actress. But this time, there were no secret backup plans, no quiet accommodations, just a firm refusal. The industry itself had changed too. Studios were tightening budgets, cutting unnecessary costs, and cracking down on waste. Costume departments weren't as willing to remake outfits just because an actress wanted to take the original home. And without Rogers sitting at the very top of the Hollywood hierarchy, no one was afraid to push back anymore. She wasn't being pushed out completely, she was still a respected name, but the days of her superstition running the show were over. The forgotten trunks. As Ginger Rogers' career slowed, so did the whispers about her vanishing costumes. The studios had moved on, the costume departments had stopped indulging her habits, and Hollywood's biggest names were now younger, fresher stars. But one question remained: what happened to the trunks? The gowns weren't neatly stored in a glass case like museum pieces. They were stuffed into trunks, sealed away, some reportedly untouched for years. Crew members who had seen the inside of those trunks never forgot the smell, the result of decades-old fabric mixed with sweat and neglect. By the late 1950s, Rogers' screen time had dwindled, and she began spending more time away from the industry. She still worked occasionally, but the days of commanding full control over costumes and wardrobe were over. Some former Hollywood insiders later claimed that when Rogers finally opened some of the trunks after years, she found dresses in a shocking state. The fabrics had stiffened, some had yellowed beyond repair, and others were falling apart at the seams. But she never spoke about it publicly. Unlike other stars who auctioned off their old costumes or donated them to studios and museums, Rogers kept most of them private. Over time, some pieces surfaced in estate sales, but many were never accounted for. Some speculated that she quietly disposed of the ones that had degraded beyond saving, while others believed she held on to them until the end. What started as a superstition had turned into a collection, and by the time it was over, it was unclear even to Rogers what she had been trying to preserve. The costumes resurface. For years, Ginger Rogers' lucky costumes remained out of sight, locked away in storage. But as time passed, pieces of her collection started to reappear, some in auctions, others in unexpected places. By the 1980s, Hollywood memorabilia had become a hot market. Collectors, museums, and private buyers were desperate for anything tied to classic stars. Rogers, known for her elegance and timeless performances, had plenty of interest. But her costumes, that was another story. Some of the dresses that surfaced were pristine, well preserved by costume archives or studio storage. Others, however, showed signs of age, rumored to be from Rogers' personal collection. Reports described stiff, discolored fabric, faded sequins, and faint traces of sweat stains. Some pieces were in such poor condition that experts questioned whether they could even be restored. One particularly talked about auction featured a gown linked to Top Hat, 1935, one of Rogers' most famous films. The listing hinted that the dress had been stored away for decades, possibly by Rogers herself. While the authenticity of these claims was debated, collectors still jumped at the chance to own a piece of Hollywood history. But not all of her costumes made it to collectors. Some disappeared entirely. Whether they were lost, discarded, or still hidden away in private collections remains a mystery. The myth and the mystery. Even after Ginger Rogers was gone, the stories about her vanishing costumes never faded. Decades later, collectors, historians, and old Hollywood insiders still debated the truth. How many dresses did she actually take? Were the rumors exaggerated? And more importantly, where were they now? Some pieces had resurfaced in auctions, turning up in unexpected places. A few landed in museum collections, carefully restored and displayed. Others disappeared completely, lost to time, or hidden away in private estates. The dresses she had stashed for years, the ones she believed carried the energy of her best performances, were now just fragile relics of a Hollywood long gone. Despite the mystery, one thing was clear. Rogers's superstition wasn't just a Hollywood rumor. There were too many stories from wardrobe staff, too many whispered accounts from costume designers who struggled to keep track of missing gowns, and while no one could prove every tale, the pattern was impossible to ignore. But why did she do it? Was it really about luck, or was it something deeper? Some believed it was her way of holding on to success. Rogers had spent decades fighting for respect in an industry that rarely gave women control. Dance was precise, fleeting, gone the second a performance ended. But a costume? That was something she could keep. Others saw it as a form of control in an unpredictable business. If she could preserve the exact conditions of a perfect performance, maybe she could repeat it. Maybe she could stay on top forever. But time doesn't work that way. Hollywood moved on, and so did Rogers. In the end, the costumes, the ones she fought to keep, the ones she never washed, the ones she believed were more than just fabric, became nothing more than forgotten trunks and faded silk. Still, even now, somewhere in a collector's archive, a museum vault, or a private estate, one of Ginger Rogers' lucky costumes still exists. And if the rumors were true, it might still smell like the past. Kim Novak, the stunning star of Vertigo, was once Hollywood's brightest light. But at the height of her fame, she vanished. How did she rise to fame so quickly, and why did she step away from it all? From Chicago dreamer to Hollywood star. She was born as Marilyn Pauline Novak on February 13, 1933 in Chicago, Illinois. Her parents were Joseph and Blanche Novak. Joseph worked as a history teacher, and her mother was a factory worker. Marilyn grew up in a modest household and attended William Penn Elementary, Farragut High School, and Wright Junior College. After high school, she briefly attended the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. In the early 1950s, Novak worked as a model and a dental assistant. Her breakthrough came when she won 2 modeling contests, Miss Deep Freeze and Miss Refrigerator, during a promotional tour. This led to a contract with Columbia Pictures. Studio head Harry Cohn saw potential in her and suggested a name change. Marilyn Novak became Kim Novak, starting her journey into Hollywood. Her first significant role was in the 1954 film Pfft, starring opposite Judy Holliday and Jack Lemmon. Her performance caught the industry's attention. That same year, she appeared in Pushover alongside Fred MacMurray, further establishing her as a rising star. The turning point came in 1955 with the film Picnic. She played Madge Owens, a small-town girl yearning for excitement. Directed by Joshua Logan, the film was a critical and commercial success, earning her a Golden Globe for Most Promising Newcomer. Critics praised her performance, with Bosley Crowther of the New York Times calling her an exciting discovery. In 1956, she starred in The Man with the Golden Arm with Frank Sinatra. Her portrayal of Molly, a woman dealing with a drug-addicted lover, showed her range as an actress. The film was nominated for 3 Academy Awards and further solidified her position in Hollywood. Novak's iconic role came in 1958 with Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo. Playing dual roles as Madeline Elster and Judy Barton, she starred opposite James Stewart. The film initially received mixed reviews, but is now considered one of the greatest films of all time. Hitchcock, known for his meticulous direction, praised her performance, noting that her portrayal was crucial to the film's success and that she brought a nuanced depth essential for the story's psychological complexity. Her rise to fame was meteoric. By the late 1950s, she was among the top box office draws, often compared to contemporaries like Marilyn Monroe and Grace Kelly. She worked with leading directors and co-stars, including William Holden, Tyrone Power, and Frederick March. Despite her success, she remained grounded. In interviews, she often spoke about the pressures of fame. "I never wanted to be a star. I wanted to be an actress," she told the Saturday Evening Post in 1957. Her humility and dedication to her craft endeared her to fans and colleagues alike. By the end of the decade, Kim Novak had firmly established herself as a major Hollywood star. Her journey from a Chicago girl to a celebrated actress was marked by hard work, talent, and a bit of luck. The Hitchcock Effect. Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo, released in 1958, became a defining moment in Kim Novak's career. This psychological thriller, now hailed as one of the greatest films ever made, paired her with James Stewart. She played dual roles, Madeline Elster and Judy Barton, a complex portrayal that showcased her acting depth. The film's production was intense. Hitchcock, known for his exacting standards, pushed Novak to deliver a performance that would leave a lasting impact. Her preparation for the role was meticulous. To embody Madeline, a character steeped in mystery and elegance, she worked closely with costume designer Edith Head. The iconic gray suit she wore became a symbol of the character's haunting presence. Novak mentioned in a Vanity Fair interview, "The suit was like a uniform. It helped me get into Madeline's skin. I felt her tension, her allure." Vertigo required her to switch personas, a task that tested her versatility. As Judy Barton, she portrayed a down-to-earth, working-class woman, a stark contrast to the sophisticated Madeline. This duality in her performance received critical acclaim. Behind the scenes, her relationship with Hitchcock was professional, though not without tension. She once said, "He was demanding, but he respected my craft. There were moments of friction, but they pushed me to give my best performance." Their collaboration on Vertigo left an indelible mark on both their careers. The film's themes of obsession and identity resonated with audiences and critics alike. Her portrayal of a woman caught in a web of manipulation and deceit was compelling. Her ability to convey subtle emotions from fear to seduction was a testament to her skill as an actress. Hollywood's Golden Girl. During the late 1950s, Kim Novak reached the peak of her career, becoming one of Hollywood's most sought-after actresses. This period was marked by a series of successful films that showcased her versatility and solidified her status as a top box office draw. In 1957, she starred in Pal Joey, a musical comedy where she played opposite Frank Sinatra and Rita Hayworth. Her role as Linda English, a nightclub singer, earned her critical acclaim. The New York Times praised her performance, noting, "Novak brings a refreshing charm to her role, balancing wit and vulnerability." Her on-screen chemistry with Sinatra was palpable, contributing to the film's success. The same year, she appeared in Gene Eagles, a biographical drama about the life of the famed Broadway actress. Playing the title role, she portrayed Eagles' tumultuous life, from her rise to fame to her tragic downfall. The film allowed her to demonstrate her dramatic range, earning her a Golden Globe nomination for Best Actress in a Motion Picture Drama. Her success continued with Belle, Book and Candle, 1958, where she reunited with James Stewart. This romantic comedy, featuring Novak as a modern-day witch who casts a love spell on Stewart's character, showcased her comedic timing and enchanting screen presence. The film was a commercial hit, adding another feather to her cap. Novak's popularity was not just due to her acting skills, but also her distinctive beauty. She was often compared to Marilyn Monroe, another iconic blonde of the era. However, Novak carved out her own niche, known for her ethereal, almost haunting allure. Photographers and magazines frequently featured her, cementing her status as a Hollywood beauty icon. Despite her glamorous image, she was known for her down-to-earth personality. In a 1958 interview with Life magazine, she said, "I'm just a girl from Chicago who got lucky. I never let the fame get to my head." This relatability endeared her to fans and colleagues alike. Novak's influence extended beyond the silver screen. She became a fashion trendsetter, with her hairstyles and outfits often emulated by women worldwide. Her iconic look in Vertigo, with the platinum blonde hair and tailored suits, became a defining style of the late 1950s. During this time, she also navigated the complexities of her personal life. She had high-profile relationships with several leading men, including Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. Her romance with Davis was particularly controversial due to the racial tensions of the era. Despite societal pressures, Novak was candid about her relationships. In an interview with the Saturday Evening Post, she remarked, "Love is love, regardless of race or status. I followed my heart." Clash with the studio system. Her career in Hollywood was marked by a significant clash with the powerful studio system, particularly Columbia Pictures and its head, Harry Cohn. This struggle for independence and creative control defined much of her professional journey and showcased her resilience in an era dominated by studio moguls. Harry Cohn, known for his tyrannical control over his stars, saw potential in Novak early on. He molded her image, selecting roles, hairstyles, and even relationships to fit the studio's vision. Her natural beauty and talent were undeniable, but Cohn's controlling nature often clashed with her desire for autonomy. "He treated me like a piece of property," she later said in an interview with The Guardian. "I wanted to be an actress, not a puppet." One of the earliest and most significant clashes came during the production of Pal Joey in 1957. Novak wanted to play the role of Linda English her way, bringing depth and nuance to the character. However, Cohn insisted on a more glamorous, superficial portrayal. Despite the tension, her performance received praise, proving her instincts were correct. In 1958, during the filming of Vertigo, Novak faced further challenges. Alfred Hitchcock, although demanding, allowed her more creative freedom than Cohn ever did. This experience highlighted the stark contrast between working under a controlling studio head and a visionary director. "Hitchcock respected my craft," she reflected. "It was a relief to work with someone who valued my input." The turning point in Novak's battle with the studio system came with Middle of the Night, 1959, a film directed by Delbert Mann. The film, a drama about a May-December romance, was a departure from her typical roles. She insisted on playing the part despite Cohn's reservations. The film received critical acclaim, and her performance was lauded as one of her best. This success bolstered her confidence and solidified her resolve to fight for meaningful roles. However, Cohn's death in 1958 brought both relief and uncertainty. Without his oppressive control, Novak hoped for more freedom, but she also faced a studio in disarray. Columbia Pictures struggled to maintain its status without Cohn's iron fist, and her career trajectory became unpredictable. In the early 1960s, she took bold steps to assert her independence. She turned down roles she felt were beneath her, including high-profile projects that would have guaranteed box office success, but offered little artistic challenge. Her decision to leave Columbia Pictures in 1965 was a significant move. Novak sought to work with directors and studios that offered her creative control. This period saw her taking on diverse roles in films like Kiss Me Stupid, 1964, and The Amorous Adventures of Moll Flanders, 1965. Although these films did not achieve the same level of success as her earlier works, they represented her commitment to artistic integrity, battling her inner demons. Behind the glamorous facade of Hollywood stardom, Kim Novak faced significant personal struggles that deeply affected her life and career. Despite her success on screen, she battled with inner demons and external pressures that took a toll on her mental and emotional well-being. Novak's struggles with mental health were well documented. She experienced bouts of depression and anxiety, conditions that were often exacerbated by the intense scrutiny and relentless pace of Hollywood. In a candid interview with People magazine in 1996, she revealed, "I went through severe periods of depression. It was hard to maintain a facade when I felt like I was falling apart inside." Her issues were not just psychological, she also struggled with physical health problems. In the early 1960s, she was diagnosed with breast cancer, a battle she chose to keep private at the time. This diagnosis added to her stress and led her to reevaluate her career and life choices. Her personal life was also tumultuous. Her high-profile relationships with stars like Frank Sinatra and Richard Johnson were often in the spotlight. Her romance with Sammy Davis Jr. was particularly challenging due to the racial prejudices of the time. In addition to her romantic relationships, Novak had to deal with the pressures of being a female star in a male-dominated industry. The expectations placed on her by the studio system were immense. Harry Cohn, the head of Columbia Pictures, was known for his controlling behavior. He often dictated her role's appearance and public image. This control extended to her personal life, with Cohn even trying to influence her relationships. Novak once remarked that Harry Cohn wanted to control every aspect of her life, describing the experience as suffocating. To cope with the pressures, she turned to painting, a passion she had nurtured since childhood. Art became her sanctuary, a way to express her emotions and find solace. She once said, "Painting saved me. It was a way to escape and process everything I was going through." Her artwork often reflected her inner turmoil and struggles, providing a glimpse into her private world. Despite these challenges, she continued to work in films throughout the 1960s. She starred in The Notorious Landlady, 1962, with Jack Lemmon, and Of Human Bondage, 1964, with Lawrence Harvey. However, the quality of her roles began to decline, partly due to the changing landscape of Hollywood, and partly due to her own battles. The pressures eventually led Novak to seek a quieter life away from the spotlight. By the late 1960s, she had moved to a remote home in Big Sur, California. This retreat allowed her to focus on her health and well-being, away from the prying eyes of the public and media. In her words, "I needed to get away, to find peace and rediscover myself." The mysterious disappearance. At the peak of her fame in the early 1960s, Kim Novak made the surprising decision to retreat from the public eye. Her sudden disappearance from Hollywood left fans and industry insiders speculating about the reasons behind her decision. Her departure was driven by a combination of personal and professional factors that eventually led her to seek a quieter, more fulfilling life. By the mid-1960s, Novak had become disillusioned with the Hollywood lifestyle. The constant scrutiny and relentless pressure took a toll on her mental and physical health. In an interview with The Telegraph in 2014, she candidly admitted, "The demands of being a movie star were overwhelming. I felt like I was losing myself in the process." In 1966, Novak married Richard Johnson, a British actor, in a ceremony that was kept relatively low-key. The couple's relationship was highly publicized, but they sought to keep their personal lives private. Their marriage, although short-lived, was a turning point for her. It was during this period that she began to seriously consider stepping away from Hollywood. Her desire for a more secluded life led her to purchase a ranch in Carmel, California. The ranch became her sanctuary, a place where she could reconnect with herself and pursue her passion for art without the distractions of fame. Her love for painting, which she had nurtured since childhood, provided a therapeutic escape from the pressures of Hollywood. She described this period in an interview with Vanity Fair as a time to heal and rediscover my true self. Novak's decision to leave Hollywood was also influenced by her increasing frustration with the roles offered to her. She had grown tired of being typecast and yearned for characters that challenged her as an actress. In an interview with The Guardian, she expressed her discontent, saying, "I wanted to be more than just a pretty face on the screen. I wanted to explore the depths of my talent." Her retreat was not a complete disappearance. Novak made occasional returns to the screen, choosing projects that intrigued her. One notable comeback was in the 1968 film The Legend of Lila Clare, directed by Robert Aldrich. The film, a dark drama about an actress haunted by the legacy of a deceased star, mirrored some of her own experiences in Hollywood. Although the film received mixed reviews, Novak's performance was praised for its intensity and depth. Unexpected comebacks. While Kim Novak had largely retreated from the limelight, her periodic returns to the screen and public appearances reminded the world of her enduring talent and charisma. These comebacks were selective and often unexpected, reflecting her desire to engage with her art on her own terms rather than under the relentless pressures of Hollywood. One notable return was in the 1980 film The Mirror Cracked, directed by Guy Hamilton and based on Agatha Christie's novel. Novak starred alongside screen legends Elizabeth Taylor and Angela Lansbury. Playing the role of Lola Brewster, a rival actress, she brought a blend of wit and sophistication to the character. The film allowed her to reconnect with the craft she loved without the pressures that once overshadowed her career. In 1991, she appeared in the television film Liebestrom, directed by Mike Figgis. She played a significant supporting role as Mrs. Anderson, a character shrouded in mystery and intrigue. The film's dark, atmospheric tone provided a fitting backdrop for her nuanced performance. Figgis, in an interview with the Los Angeles Times, expressed his admiration for Novak, noting that she brought an incredible depth to the role, with her experience and subtlety adding essential layers to the character. Throughout the years, Novak also made several notable public appearances that captivated audiences and rekindled interest in her life and career. One such moment was at the 2014 Academy Awards, where she was invited to present the Oscar for Best Animated Feature. Standing alongside Matthew McConaughey, Novak received a warm and enthusiastic reception from the audience. Her appearance was met with both admiration and controversy, largely due to her candid discussion about her use of cosmetic surgery. She addressed the criticism with grace, later telling People magazine, "I feel good about myself, and that's what matters." Her return to the public eye in these moments highlighted not only her enduring star power, but also her resilience and ability to navigate the complexities of fame on her own terms. These appearances reminded fans and industry insiders alike of her significant contributions to film and her enduring legacy. Novak's sporadic re-engagement with Hollywood also included interviews and retrospectives. She often participated in discussions about her classic films, sharing insights and behind-the-scenes stories that enriched the audience's understanding of her work. In a 2012 interview with Turner Classic Movies, TCM, Novak reflected on her career, saying, "I've had my ups and downs, but every role, every experience has shaped who I am. I'm grateful for it all." The life Kim Novak leads now. Today she lives a life far removed from the intense spotlight of Hollywood, choosing instead a tranquil existence that allows her to reflect on her remarkable journey and continue her passion for art. Her life in Oregon, where she resides with her husband Robert Malloy, is characterized by peace, creativity, and a connection to nature. Novak's ranch in the picturesque Rogue River Valley offers the perfect backdrop for her artistic pursuits. Here, she finds solace and inspiration in the natural surroundings, which have become a central theme in her artwork. Her love for animals and the outdoors is evident in her paintings, which often depict serene landscapes, horses, and other wildlife. Novak once described her ranch as a sanctuary where I can be myself and express my true feelings through my art. Her commitment to painting has not waned over the years. Novak continues to create and exhibit her work, with her pieces being featured in various galleries and art shows. Her art has been well received, with critics appreciating the emotional depth and unique style she brings to her canvases. Novak has made select public appearances to honor her contributions to the film industry and to connect with new generations of fans. There was a time when Hollywood sweethearts were untouchable. They were adored by millions, carefully crafted by studios to be everything audiences wanted. But behind the dazzling smiles and picture-perfect romances, a much darker reality lurked. The industry that built them up had no problem tearing them down. The making of a sweetheart. In the Golden Age, studios could control an actress's life. They decided how she looked, how she spoke, and even who she could date. If a girl had beauty, innocence, and charm, the studio would work hard to make her America's next obsession. First, they would start with the looks. To be a Hollywood sweetheart, you needed to be young and fresh-faced. You had to be the type of woman audiences wanted to protect. Soft curls, bright eyes, and a warm smile. No heavy makeup or sharp features here, just a look that melts hearts. For example, Mary Pickford, America's sweetheart herself, with her iconic golden ringlets and gentle demeanor. She was the original template, and every sweetheart after her had to fit the mold in some way. But make no mistake, looks were only a part of the entire equation. Public image and how these actresses were perceived was also a big deal. The studios had entire teams dedicated to crafting these actresses' public images. PR agents went as far as writing their life stories before they had even lived them. A sweetheart needed to seem wholesome, kind, and naturally lovable. She was the girl next door who became a star. If her real background didn't match the image, no problem. The studio would rewrite her past. A troubled childhood? Erased? An unhappy marriage? Covered up. Then the publicity stunts became a thing. These actresses were always seen doing something cute or heartwarming, visiting children's hospitals, smiling for photos with puppies, going on staged innocent dates with equally beloved actors. Everything was calculated and curated to make them seem approachable. Fans had to feel like they knew them, like they could run into them at a soda shop and share a milkshake, and it worked. Audiences fell in love with women like Judy Garland, who had the voice of an angel and the face of someone you just wanted to hug. Never mind that behind the scenes, she was overworked, exhausted, and fed pills to keep up with the grueling schedule. To the world, she was just Dorothy, forever young, forever sweet. Then, Debbie Reynolds was also a part of these Hollywood sweethearts. She was the ultimate good girl who played up her sunny personality in movies like Singin' in the Rain. Hollywood made sure she stayed in that role off-screen too, especially when her marriage to Eddie Fisher ended in scandal. She was painted as the innocent victim, the perfect girl next door wronged by love, because that's what sweethearts did. They didn't get angry, they didn't fight back, they just smiled through the heartbreak. And let's not forget Doris Day, whose name alone sounds like sunshine. She was Hollywood's golden girl, singing about que sera, sera, while always playing the charming, independent, but never too rebellious woman. Studios kept her in that perfect, perky image for as long as they could, even as the world around her changed. These women were loved, adored, and admired, but only as long as they stayed in the boxes Hollywood put them in. The second they wanted to grow up, take on different roles, or show the world they were more than just America's sweetheart, the industry wasn't so sweet to them anymore. The expiration dates. Hollywood had a strict rule when it came to sweethearts. They had an expiration date. The industry thrived on youth and innocence, and the moment an actress started to age, sometimes even just hitting her late 20s, she was at risk of being cast aside. The very same studios that built them up had no problem replacing them with someone younger, fresher, and more marketable, and this realization was a nightmare for these sweethearts. Take Jean Seberg, for instance. She was a darling of the late 1950s, a fresh-faced beauty who seemed destined for a long career. But Hollywood had other plans. As she matured and tried to take on more serious roles, the industry lost interest. Even worse, her personal life became a target. Her involvement in political activism made her a problem for the studio system, and soon the same machine that had crafted her sweetheart image was now working against her. The pressure became unbearable, and she struggled with mental health issues until her tragic and suspicious passing at just 40. But she was not the only one on this boat. Lupe Velez was there too. She was the vibrant, energetic star known for her comedic timing and fiery personality. While she was initially adored for her unique charm, the studio system controlled nearly every aspect of her life. Her relationships were scrutinized, but when she became pregnant out of wedlock, a scandal in those days, and ruining the sweet girl image, Hollywood turned its back on her, and that was it. With no support from the industry that once profited off her name, she felt hopeless. Her life ended in tragedy, another victim of the system's impossible expectations. And of course, there were the exploitative contracts. Anybody would have given an arm and a leg to be famous, and so these sweethearts were often signed to contracts that looked glamorous on paper, but were deeply exploitative. Studios took the lion's share of their earnings, locked them into suffocating deals, and even controlled their spending. Some actresses, like Teresa Wright, dared to push back against the system, refusing to play by Hollywood's rigid sweetheart rules. She was a rare case. She survived, but at the cost of her mainstream career. Most others who tried to break free from their contracts were either blacklisted or simply allowed to fade into obscurity, left struggling to make ends meet. The pressure to stay perfect also led many actresses down dark paths. Barbara Payton, once a promising young starlet, saw her career implode after studio-driven stress led her to alcohol and destructive relationships. Hollywood didn't offer help. It simply cast her aside when she was no longer profitable. She went from starring in movies to struggling to survive, a stark reminder of how quickly the industry could discard its former darlings. For these women, being Hollywood's sweetheart was never just about talent. It was about being marketable, controllable, and eternally youthful. The moment they no longer fit that mold, the industry made sure they knew it. The dark side of fame. Fame looks really good on the surface, but for Hollywood sweethearts, it often came with a dark side that no amount of studio-crafted smiles could hide. These so-called sweethearts were dealing with awful things in the background that none of their fans would suspect. And why would they? The industry loved to present them as perfect, lovable, and untouched by scandal. But behind the scenes, Many of these women were struggling in ways the public never saw. Love, for one, was rarely a fairy tale. These actresses were expected to maintain their sweetheart image even in their personal lives, which often meant being trapped in unhappy marriages or forced into relationships for good PR. Debbie Reynolds, for example, married teen heartthrob Eddie Fisher, and for a while, they were the golden couple. But when he left her for Elizabeth Taylor, Debbie wasn't just dealing with heartbreak, she was dealing with the world watching, sympathizing, and expecting her to handle it with grace. There was no space for rage, bitterness, or even healing in private. She had to keep smiling, keep playing the role of the sweet, scorned woman, because that was what people expected. That's what the studio wanted. For others, the pressure of always being on led to dangerous coping mechanisms. Sandra Dee is another heartbreaking example. She was the ultimate fresh-faced sweetheart of the late 50s and early 60s, known for her roles in Gidget and Tammy Tell Me True. But behind her sunny, innocent image was a lifetime of trauma. She had been abused as a child, controlled by her overbearing mother, and later forced into a marriage with Bobby Darin, which, while glamorous on the outside, was filled with tension. When Hollywood moved on from her, she struggled with severe anorexia, alcoholism, and depression. By the time she passed away in 2005, she had long faded from the industry, a tragic symbol of what happened when Hollywood's sweethearts were no longer needed. Then there was Marilyn Monroe, who, despite being painted as the ultimate bombshell, still had that tragic sweetheart quality. Audiences saw her as beautiful, charming, and desirable, but few saw the lonely woman underneath. In real life, she longed for real love, for stability, but the men in her life, from Joe DiMaggio to Arthur Miller, often wanted the fantasy more than the real Marilyn. By the time she passed under mysterious circumstances in 1962, she was isolated, exhausted, and, in many ways, abandoned by the industry that had once worshipped her. But let's talk about money for a moment. Surely when you're a Hollywood sweetheart, you definitely have the financial power to drown all your sufferings and challenges, right? Well, that isn't always the case. Many sweethearts, trusting the wrong people or simply being kept in the dark about their own finances, ended up broke. Judy Garland was once one of the highest-paid actresses in Hollywood, but by the end of her life, she was performing in small clubs just to make ends meet. The final blow came with the way some of these women left the world. Whether it was overdoses, suicides, or circumstances that never quite added up, their passing shook Hollywood. Some, like Marilyn, became legends, their tragic ends only adding to their mystique. Others, like Dorothy Dandridge, who was found lifeless at 42 under financially and emotionally crushing circumstances, became tales of what happens when Hollywood is done with you. But on the bright side, some sweethearts fought back. They refused to disappear, refused to let the industry decide when their time was up. Debbie Reynolds, for instance, took her pain and turned it into a powerhouse career in live performances and business, proving she was more than just a girl-next-door type. Doris Day, who had been trapped in the studio sweetheart mold for years, reinvented herself as an animal rights activist and found a new kind of purpose beyond Hollywood. Not every Hollywood sweetheart got her happy ending, but the ones who did, they wrote their own story, no longer letting Hollywood do it for them. The downfall. Let's get it straight. Hollywood sweethearts didn't disappear overnight. Their downfall was a slow unraveling, piece by piece, as audiences started to crave something different. You see, for decades, the wholesome, wide-eyed, good girl was the gold standard. People wanted to believe in the innocent, untouchable, larger-than-life stars that studios carefully packaged and sold. But as time went on, the cracks started to show. By the late 1950s and early 1960s, moviegoers were changing. The world itself was changing. The post-war optimism that had made America fall in love with sweethearts was starting to wear off, replaced with rebellion, counterculture, and a desire for something real. Audiences weren't as easily fooled anymore. They had seen too many PR romances, too many actresses forced to play the same roles on and off screen. The sweetheart image that was once a selling point started to feel artificial and outdated. Actresses who were once adored for their purity suddenly found themselves out of place in a shifting Hollywood, and one of these actresses was Sandra Dee. Sandra was a sweetheart of the late 1950s and early 1960s, but as the 60s progressed, Her style of charm started to feel too old-fashioned. The rise of actresses like Faye Dunaway and Jane Fonda, women who played complex, independent, and even morally ambiguous roles, meant there was little room left for the girl-next-door type. Sandra Dee's career faded fast, and she later admitted that she never knew how to transition beyond the role Hollywood had built for her. Another actress who struggled here was Doris Day. For years, she was America's beloved Golden Girl, known for her sunny personality and squeaky clean image. But as the sexual revolution of the late 60s took hold, audiences wanted bolder, more daring female leads. Day's romantic comedies, where she played chaste but charming women, suddenly felt outdated in a world that was embracing the rise of more sexually liberated and defiant female characters. Studios tried to modernize her image, but it was too late. The era of the sweetheart was fading fast. But here's what most people miss about this downfall of Hollywood sweethearts. The decline wasn't just about changing tastes, it was also about exposure. The studio system had controlled everything for decades, hiding scandals and keeping their stars in line. But as the press became more aggressive and stars gained more independence, the truth started coming out. The public learned that many of their beloved sweethearts had been living anything but wholesome lives behind closed doors. The rise of tabloid journalism, paparazzi culture, and more invasive media coverage meant that the carefully crafted facades weren't so easy to maintain anymore. Shirley Temple used to be Hollywood's most famous child star, a symbol of pure innocence. But when she tried to transition into adult roles, audiences weren't interested. The public had loved her as a little girl, but they didn't want to see her grow up. She later revealed how difficult it was to break free from the identity that had been forced on her. And once she left Hollywood, she exposed many of the darker truths of the industry, including the harassment and exploitation she had endured as a young actress. Even the sweethearts who wanted to adapt and evolve struggled. Debbie Reynolds tried to shift into more serious, dramatic roles, but Hollywood still saw her as the girl next door. When she moved into television, she had to fight to keep her career alive while younger, edgier actresses took center stage. The rise of actresses like Barbra Streisand, who had a completely different, more unconventional appeal, signaled that audiences were no longer looking for perfection. They wanted something real, flawed, and human. By the 1970s, the Hollywood sweetheart was practically extinct. The film industry had moved into grittier, more realistic storytelling, and the wholesome, innocent female lead had no place in that world. Actresses like Sybil Shepherd, Diane Keaton, and even a young Meryl Streep took on roles that were messy, complicated, and unpredictable, everything the classic sweethearts had never been allowed to be. The downfall of Hollywood sweethearts wasn't just about aging out of the system. It was about the world realizing they had been sold an illusion. The more people saw behind the curtain, the less they believed in the perfection they had once idolized. What had once been the ideal became a relic of a bygone era, something people now viewed as naive, restrictive, and ultimately fake. Hollywood had built the sweethearts up, and slowly but surely, Hollywood and the audience tore them down. The attempted comebacks. Many Hollywood sweethearts, once discarded by the industry that made them, tried to claw their way back into relevance. Some reinvented themselves, some pivoted to entirely different careers, and others found that no matter how hard they tried, Hollywood had already moved on without them. Take Anne Baxter, for instance. She had been a young, glamorous leading lady in the 1940s, even winning an Oscar for The Razor's Edge. But as she aged, the roles dried up. Instead of fading into obscurity, she tried to reinvent herself on television, taking on roles in shows like Batman and the Love Boat. She even turned to Broadway, proving her talent extended beyond the rigid confines of Hollywood's sweetheart mold. But despite her efforts, she never fully regained her former status. Hollywood had already crowned its new darlings. Then, let's also talk about Veronica Lake. She had been one of the most glamorous stars of the 1940s, known for her signature peekaboo hairstyle and sultry screen presence. But as trends shifted, she was pushed out, struggling with alcoholism and financial ruin. In a desperate attempt to revive her career, she wrote a memoir in the 1960s, hoping to remind the world of who she had been. The book gained some attention, and she even managed to land a few minor roles. But it was too little, too late. Hollywood wasn't interested in a comeback story. It had already replaced her with the next big thing. On the other hand, some sweethearts found success by stepping behind the camera or leaving Hollywood altogether. Ida Lupino, once known for her beauty and charm, refused to accept the expiration date stamped on most actresses' careers. Instead of waiting for good roles to come her way, she became one of the first successful female directors in Hollywood, helming films like The Hitchhiker and The Bigamist. She proved that reinvention was possible, but only if an actress was willing to break free from the industry's expectations. But for every success story, there were countless actresses who tried to stay relevant and failed. Joan Leslie, once a fresh-faced sweetheart of the 1940s, attempted to return to Hollywood in the 50s and 60s, but by then no one remembered the girl-next-door image she had once been famous for. Even in smaller roles, she struggled to find work. Hollywood, for all its love of nostalgia, had no patience for women who had aged out of their prime. The tragedy of Hollywood's sweethearts wasn't just that they were discarded, it was that their attempts to return were often met with indifference. The industry that once adored them had a short memory, and for many, no amount of talent or reinvention could bring them back into the spotlight. The new sweetheart concept. The Hollywood sweetheart may have faded as a rigid cookie-cutter persona, but the essence of it never truly disappeared. Instead, it evolved. The industry learned from the mistakes of the past. Audiences no longer wanted flawless, impossibly perfect women who seemed untouchable. They wanted charm, warmth, and relatability, but with an edge. The modern sweetheart isn't about being prim, proper, and protected by studio executives. She's approachable, down to earth, and most importantly, real. Or at least, she seems that way. In the 90s and early 2000s, Julia Roberts and Sandra Bullock carried the torch, but in a way that felt fresh. Julia Roberts, with her megawatt smile and effortless charm, was a sweetheart, but she wasn't passive or fragile like the sweethearts of old. Whether in Pretty Woman, Notting Hill, or Erin Brockovich, she played women who had depth, flaws, and agency. Sandra Bullock, on the other hand, became America's rom-com darling with movies like While You Were Sleeping and Miss Congeniality. But unlike the sweethearts of the golden age, her characters weren't just waiting for love to find them. They were funny, awkward, and often the underdog. Then came the next evolution. Actresses like Jennifer Lawrence and Emma Stone brought a more modern take on the sweetheart archetype. But instead of being polished and poised, they leaned into being quirky and self-deprecating. Jennifer Lawrence tripped on her way to accept her Oscar, cracked jokes about food in interviews, and gave off a vibe of being the cool girl who doesn't take herself too seriously. Emma Stone, with her girl-next-door appeal, followed a similar path, blending charm with wit and intelligence. These actresses weren't untouchable, they were relatable, even goofy at times. Something that would have been unthinkable for the sweethearts of old Hollywood, who were expected to maintain an aura of perfection at all times. The biggest difference between then and now is control. The old Hollywood sweethearts were molded by studios, their images micromanaged down to the last detail. They weren't allowed to break character, even in real life. Today, actresses have far more control over their careers and public personas. They can poke fun at themselves, take on grittier roles without ruining their image, and step away from Hollywood without being permanently exiled. That said, some things haven't changed. There's still a demand for a certain kind of woman to be America's sweetheart. There's still an expectation that these actresses be likable, charming, and not too controversial. And just like before, Hollywood has a tendency to move on when a new, younger version comes along. The sweetheart may not be as rigidly defined as she once was, but she still exists, just in a more adaptable, self-aware form.